Good evening and welcome to the 22nd meeting of 2022. Before we get too far, I wanted to thank, let's introduce all of us. So Denny Swenson, Chair. Should we go alphabetical? Rich Beeler.
Rich Beeler, Secretary.
Ms. Hall.
Meredith Hall, member.
Ms. O'Donnell.
Kathleen O'Donnell, member.
Ms. Tagayas.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
And our staff this evening. Mr.
Tim Zawinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
Allison Quinn, Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development.
Okay, and Ms. Gedman.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Okay. And before I forget, I wanted to thank Allison Quinn for all of her service these last number of years. She's just been incredible. We're very sorry that she's returning back to where she came from in Boston. However, she's moving on up and we're very happy for her, and we know she'll do wonderful things there. And I just wanted to thank her because she wowed me right out of the gate on historic preservation. She came in within a couple of weeks in her new position. She had mapped out the whole town and showed me all of the historic preservation treasures that we have, and had wonderful ideas on ways to preserve those. She's done an incredible job on community outreach to the point where whenever I'm in any neighborhood or supermarket or out and about in the community, I'm always hearing wonderful things about how she has interrelated with the citizens. They do feel heard, and that's really, really important in these times. So I just want to thank her for her people skills, her thoughtful approach to development, absolute can-do attitude, and thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So you're an absolute pleasure to work with, and you will be missed by all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Denny. It's been a great 2.5 years working for the planning board. I've really enjoyed working for the town overall. I feel like I learned a lot. I think we all did. It's been a grind the last 2.5 years. We dealt with COVID, we dealt with 40Bs. But I think everyone's heart is in the right place, and I'm optimistic that you guys will all continue to do great work. You got Tim, and he's going to pull in some great personalities. So all good things ahead. Thanks.
Well, it feels like 10 years instead of 2.5, but that's how close I feel to you. So I feel like we've aged a great deal together in our short 2.5 years together. So.
Yeah, we were all together in the worst of times. Is that like an old play, I think?
It's true. We've been through a lot. So thank you for everything. So we still have a little time left with you. So
you do.
Okay. All right. We'll see you tomorrow in person. Thank you. Okay. So next meeting dates, we have March 10th and we have March 24th. And then I guess we will add one meeting right before so we'll add March 14th. What do we think? 6:30 for a 7:30 Zoom warrant meeting?
Do you think we need the hour? I mean, what do you?
Yeah. Do 7, March 14th, 7 p.m.
That seems fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even think we need an hour. I mean, we'd lovely to chat, but I don't think we really need to talk. For
Okay. That's fine with me.
We did a well, I need to figure out what we're gonna do. We did Microsoft Teams the last time we had a town meeting, right? During the town meeting to like make up for not being able to sit together. How did that work? I don't remember how that worked out.
It was okay. Yeah. I think I might go to the town hall just to be more focused, if that's okay. And others are welcome to join me.
Can we request that the moderator let us know whether any amendments are being submitted in advance so that we have an idea of whether we need more time actually, because if, you know, if in the past it would be on the floor that you would find out about the amendments, but now you actually we have an opportunity to get them in advance, right? Because the moderator asked for them in advance. So I guess that would be my suggestion in terms of the time. And then if there's a number of them and we think that we're going to need to have discussion, like, you know, to accept amendments, et cetera, then I think in person, I'd be happy to do in person as well. I just think it's easier to try to have a discussion that way versus in the electronic format.
So maybe we, oh, sorry, Kathleen.
I was just saying, I think we should meet in person.
Okay, so we'll book a room at town hall or something.
Yeah.
All right, let me make a note to do that. We did, I don't know if the whole board got it. There was a sort of a request for some
Yeah.
amendment on the memory
Ned
care.
Cork-
Denny, you were
Yeah,
involved
Ned
with
Corcoran
that.
is here. Ned Corcoran is here. I'm going to allow him to talk, if that's okay, Tim. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, absolutely, go for it.
Hi, Ned. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. We did, there was a series of amendments filed by one town meeting member for Article 1. And I submitted a memorandum back through Tim, I think you, Denny, and to George Asher with respect to concerns we have about 2 of those proposed amendments. And it's certainly something I think that you may want to make sure you have time to consider those before you get to town meeting.
Yeah, I'll get those out first thing in the morning.
Okay.
So is that going to be on the, so I'm sorry, Denny.
I was just going to ask, should we put that on the March 10th agenda?
That's what I was going to ask too. So thank you. We're on the same wavelength there. I think so.
Yeah. Okay. All
That'd be
right.
good.
Well,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Mr. Corcoran, did the majority of those were friendly amendments that you were comfortable with?
Yes, I think there were 8 or 9 amendments. The first 2, we had some concern with them. And so I submitted a brief memo back through Tim that explained our concerns with respect to each, and I can explain them in greater detail when we get to March 10th, if that's the appropriate time.
Okay, we do have discussion of March special town meetings at the end of our agenda tonight. If we wanted to do that a little bit then, but we do have 2 public hearings to get through first, so.
Yeah, I've got the second one, so I'm happy to stand by and participate later if that's helpful to the board, or another time, whatever is convenient to you.
Okay, I think we have a pretty light agenda on March 10th, and where we have 2 public hearings, I think we can fit that in pretty easily. So why don't we do that? Why don't we welcome you back on March 10th?
That'll be great. I know
Thank you.
I know I have one of the public hearings that night too, so I'll be there.
Okay, okay, good. Thank
Thank
you, thank you. All right, and Tim, you'll get we can look at those, the full board can look at those in the meantime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll send out the amendments and then Ned's memo as well.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. All right, so next meeting dates, March 10th. We could say March 14th, 6:30 for now. If we don't get any amendments, we'll shift it to 7 at a later time. And then March 24th is another meeting date. All right. Approval of minutes. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to go through Cheryl suggested changes as of yet, so I'm not quite ready to approve those. Do we want to do our staff update, Mr. Truinsky?
I don't have a ton to, I mean, I could report on a bunch of things, but I won't. I gave the same presentation on the MBTA community zoning that I gave to you all a few weeks ago. I gave to the select board on Tuesday. Just gonna be a lot of work. I am putting together a sort of a skeleton draft of a comment letter for the select board, for them to kind of chew on over their next two meetings, March 9th and then March 22nd, I believe their next meeting is. I'm doing that on behalf of the planning board. I mean, on behalf of the select board. The planning board may have its own comments that it may want to make. It may want to just echo what the select board comes up with. I will keep you in the loop on whatever I put together for the select board, in case you all want to add to it or supplement it in some way.
On that note, can we put that on the agenda for the 10th next week?
Okay, now I'm afraid that agenda is getting too packed. Would it be
Okay.
possible to do the 24th? And then that would be our last chance to get all of our comments together and off to the select board, though. I mean,
Well, they don't have to necessarily, they don't necessarily have to go to the select board. If you like, it's a public comment period at the state level. I mean, your neighbor could write comments if they wanted to. I think it's perfectly fine, within bounds for the planning board to submit, its own comments. To the extent that they may reiterate or the only reason I bring it up is because if you and the select board are saying the same thing, or, there's only a couple kind of additions or subtractions or whatever, maybe it makes sense to just incorporate them, but, we can figure that out, I guess.
I do
Yeah,
feel like it might be getting late if we push it too far out.
okay.
It would be nice if Tim has a draft that we could have, just look at in advance and just keep our comments brief. If there's anything we can add, or we can send our comments to Tim individually as well, and he can sort of consolidate and we can discuss. But I do feel like, if we limit the time maybe but of comments, but
Okay.
it may be late to push it out. So
Okay. All right, then March 10th, we'll put on the 10th and the 24th, we'll finalize. How's that?
yeah.
Okay.
Can I make another request here, Tim? I was tuned into the select board. Thank you, Kathleen and Denny, for speaking. I felt as if you two did well, and I didn't need to add to your comments. But I did see that you have new slides, Tim, from what we saw previously. So if you could circulate your new slide deck, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's actually it'll be on the select board website. So once that link is up, I'll just send you the link.
Okay. All right. So let's go into our citizen speak. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak on something that is not on our agenda? We are on our agenda. We have the citizen petition to amend the temporary apartment bylaw. And then we have a scenic road application before us. And then we're going to talk about an ADU information sheet during the town meeting zoning article discussion tonight. Is there, if anybody would like to raise their hand to speak during citizen speak on any other topic, now would be a great time. Okay, then on we go. So Tim, were you thinking we should do the scenic road because it would be quick? Or do we have the opportunity?
I think the citizens petition article, I think, is technically first.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do that, you would need to kind of open that and then continue it to later on.
Okay, I'm happy to go in order. All right, let's open the public hearing for the citizens petition to amend the temporary apartment bylaw at the annual town meeting occurring in May. Okay, do I need a second for that or we're good? Okay. All right. I thought I would, let's see, we have Alex Whiteside has his hand up, and I know he's more familiar than I am with this. So Good evening, Mr. Whiteside. Are you able to?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening. I don't think I'm going to get a picture, so I will proceed without one.
Okay.
This citizens article was presented by 16 residents to make changes to the town's current temporary apartment bylaw. And the temporary apartment bylaw has been criticized a number of times in some of the studies. And the point has been made that it needs amendment. And I've talked with other sponsors of the article, and I've also talked with some of the attorneys who work with the temporary apartment bylaw in town. And after these discussions, we identified a number of issues which seem to be the primary issues with the temporary apartment bylaw as it stands. As you know, the temporary apartment bylaw is for families, and it's limited to families, and it's been in effect for many, many years. And I made no changes, or there were no changes made with respect to the requirement that families be served, other than the fact that we have expanded the people, the potential tenants in a temporary apartment by adding caregivers to elderly residents and childcare providers. But let me just run through the 9 points that are made in the citizens petition.
Alex, would it be helpful for me to put that text on the screen for you?
The entire article?
Yeah, so
You could do that. That'd be fine. There's nothing else on the screen. Okay, great. The first change has to do with the definition of temporary apartment. We've expanded it from being entirely self-contained in a dwelling to include additions to a dwelling and to include attached garages. And so that is the first change. The second change has to do with the eligible tenants. The eligible tenants are the same as they are now, which are family members, but we have also added caregiver and childcare providers to these potential tenants. These are a new category of potential tenants in a temporary apartment. The third change has to do with the relationship between the tenants, and there currently is a requirement for a family relationship between the tenants, and we add to this caregivers and childcare providers as being a satisfactory relationship for the tenants. The fourth change has to do with the design requirements. And since we're now allowing exterior modifications, the design requirements have been modified to require the designs of the exterior modifications which would be made. The fifth change has to do with termination. And we make clear in this amendment that termination generally, when there's a termination, what the owner occupant has to do is remove the stove and remove the refrigerator. And generally, that's enough. That converts it back. If the Board of Appeals in a special permit requires something else, they could require it. But we make clear that in the usual case, you remove the stove, you remove the refrigerator, and the temporary department is thereby decommissioned. I do mention the special permit. The temporary apartment is a special permit procedure. Any temporary apartment requires a special permit with the notice of a hearing by the Board of Appeals and a decision by the Board of Appeals. The sixth change is has to do with the current restrictions. Say you can't use garages. There are restrictions about parts of the house that you can't use for a temporary apartment. And the change simply says that you can use the dwelling, you can use additions to the dwelling, and you can use attached garages to the dwelling. It does also say that a temporary apartment may not be located in a detached building, and that is the current provision and was not changed. It's what the provision has been. The seventh change has to do with termination, and we've made it so that when you sell the premises, that would be a termination event, but that the new owner has the opportunity to notify the building inspector that the temporary apartment will continue in use and agreed to abide by the terms of the permit. And the building inspector can allow the new owner a new term, a new 4-year term, without any requirement of going back to the Board of Appeals. It provides that an absence of an owner occupant for more than a year is a termination event, but it also allows an owner occupant 6 months to live elsewhere, such as somewhere in the South. The provisions also say that when there is the permit for a temporary apartment, it's a 4-year term. That's the current way it works. And so we've continued the 4-year term, but we allow renewal by notice to the building commissioner asking for a new term and agreeing to abide by the terms of the permit and the zoning. And the building inspector can issue a new term, once again, without any requirement of going to the Board of Appeals. It's also a saving provision if people forget to do it and the permit expires. The building commissioner can give the owner occupant an extra 60 days to make the request for a new term. The 8th provision is very small. It's simply, since the Board of Appeals isn't involved in extensions of the special permit, the language that it needs to give notice is stricken. And the final one is there's currently a definition of temporary apartment in the last paragraph. And as I started by pointing out, we have a new definition that makes clear that the temporary apartment is not limited to the inside of an existing dwelling, but can be in an addition and an attached garage. So the final definition is stricken. And these are the changes, and all these changes are changes which I've talked to people about, and they seem to be they seem to focus on matters that people think are problems with the current provision. I haven't, I haven't made substantive changes other than what I've discussed in matters such as who can be a tenant. I've continued what we have, expanding it a little bit to include caregivers and childcare providers, but not attempting to change the basic structure of what we have currently in effect. And I think with these changes, it's going to be a much more flexible and easy to use bylaw. And I think that elderly residents and families of elderly residents are going to be quite pleased if it's adopted. And I urge you to recommend to the town meeting that they do so. And thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Could you refresh my memory? Are caretakers already included in the temporary apartment bylaw?
Caregivers are included in the tenancy that if the tenants have to have relationships with each other, and a caregiver to an elderly tenant is a proper tenant, but we have provided that caregivers to the owner occupant are also proper tenants. So we've expanded it, but there is a provision that caregivers to other tenants can be tenants. But there's
And what about caretakers, like people who take care of the property?
caretakers are not included
Okay.
unless they're related.
Okay, okay.
Unless,
Okay.
and there is another provision having to do with caretakers, but that's a issue for another day, I think.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you. Did anyone have any questions for Alex before we open it up to
I
everyone?
have one question. I'm looking at the, let me get to the, I was looking at the markup, the red line version. So let me get to the part that Alex was reading from. It was a change in, well, maybe you will be able to find it in that version sooner than I can. It's under what the, it's paragraph G, and a special permit can be terminated for reasons. The zoning bylaw currently otherwise allows for boarders or lodgers has it always been in this temporary apartment bylaw that was taken away as what's allowed? In this particular.
If you, in the current bylaw, and I didn't suggest a change in this, but there could be a change to have a limited number of boarders in a dwelling, but that's once again, but if you look at G3 in the existing bylaw, it says residence by a boarder or lodger in either the temporary apartment or in the principal dwelling quarters is reason for termination. And I didn't
Yeah, so just a
change.
question on that, Alex, is if that's reason for termination, whereas otherwise in our zoning bylaws that is allowed, wouldn't there have to be a provision somewhere that says it's not allowed for there to be a termination?
There is a provision.
I didn't see it. Where is it?
It's in the, you didn't see it in the existing bylaw?
No, I saw where it's still under how it can be terminated for it, but where does it say that you can't do it? Because the zoning, a different section of our zoning bylaws does allow that. I'm sure you're aware of that, but I didn't see anywhere in the temporary apartment section where it says you can't do it. I only saw that you can be terminated for it. And it seems like you have a
All
punishment for
right.
something that you're allowed to do.
Look at F.
Yeah, okay.
It says, during the period a temporary apartment exists, there shall be no boarders or lodges in the principal dwelling quarters or in the temporary apartment.
Okay,
So it's
That's
in
what I was
F,
asking.
it's the last sentence, and this is a special permit, and special permits can make special rules. That's the way special permits write. So even though boarders or lodges are generally acceptable, you can make a different provision when you're dealing with a special permit.
all right. I just wanted to be clear about that. Thanks for pointing me to section F.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Is there anyone from the board that wanted to ask Alex any further questions before we open it up to the public?
Denny, I did want to make a recommendation before we go to the public, if Tim could review his memo, please, staff memo on this.
Sure. I would welcome hearing from Tim.
I mean, if there's other folks from the board that wanted to speak up, I can wait. But
Well, I'm happy to hear from you now, and then and I'll go after you.
So thank you, and I'll try to be brief, because I think a lot of what went into my memo is really kind of really just kind of rehashing arguments that were made both by planning staff and by members of the planning board surrounding kind of the reasons for adopting or recommending the adoption of the proposed ADU bylaw that's going to be considered at the special town meeting. That bylaw was written kind of in response to inadequacies or deficiencies that the planning board saw in the temporary apartment bylaw. And I think I'll start off by saying that all of these changes in this citizens petition taken sort of by themselves are fine. And there's no denying that they're improvements on what is existing. I think, particularly the expansion to caretakers is good. I think that, there are clarifications and more specificity in the submission requirements, which is good. The additional clarity in the submission requirements on what changes would need to be made to reincorporate the unit back into the primary dwelling. I think that The way Alex describes it, with sort of taking out the stove and the refrigerator, that's how it's done. And I don't doubt that leads to a not insignificant number of illegal apartments. That if all it takes is you take out the stove for your inspection and the building inspector says, okie doke, you can no longer prepare food here. This is not an independent unit. Good luck. All it takes is wheeling that stove back in, and all of a sudden we've got an apartment that's off the books, unmonitored, and you could rent it to anybody. So I think to the extent that the proposed amendments, include a clause about you've got to show the changes that would happen to this thing to reincorporate them. I just think that gives the Board of Appeals a little bit more of a tool, because as Alex said, the Board of Appeals can put a requirement in to get their special permit. I don't know if they actually do that. So I think that change acts as a sort of a signal to them that, like, hey, maybe you should be looking for something more than just wheeling out the fridge. So that, it actually is, a significant change to reincorporate. And then I think the allowing the building commissioner to approve an extension of a special permit rather than requiring an entirely new public hearing at the Board of Appeals, I think is a good one. I get calls not infrequently from people who there's a huge pain in the neck. They're trying to do the right thing to go through the process to extend their permit, and they've got to pay for postage, they've got to pay for an ad in the paper, they've got to do all this stuff. Making it a ministerial approval, I think, is a step in the right direction. All of that being said, and if we didn't have what I consider to be a far superior bylaw proposal on the table, I would say, go ahead, go for it, this is fine. But and I'll let the proponents, of the citizens petition speak for themselves, but I think the proposition here is don't vote for ADUs at the special town meeting, vote for this at the annual town meeting. And I wouldn't recommend the planning board to recommend that. I wouldn't recommend town meeting to do that, because again, I think that, the ADU bylaw proposal is superior, because I think that the fundamental issues to the temporary apartment bylaw that the ADU proposal is responding to remain unchanged. The special permit requirement for all temporary apartments, I think, there is a chilling effect there for people that, for either cost reasons or time reasons or privacy reasons, expose themselves to a public hearing where anyone can get up and offer comments about what they're trying to do with their home. I think it does prevent people from wanting to do this sort of thing. I think the family requirement is just archaic and a relic. And it would be great if it was gone. I think that it is, and I've said that exclusionary. I think it says if you're not already in town, if you don't have a connection to town, and you can't afford to buy a single family house in Milton, which most people can't, you're kind of out of luck. And it really prevents people who would benefit from, for instance, earning some extra income, out of an ADU. Can't do that, because if they don't have family, then they can't do it. And I think sort of having definitions of family in a zoning bylaw is again not a 21st century thing. People choose to create bonds between each other on all sorts of bases that they would consider to be family. But if it's not X, Y, and Z that's laid out in the zoning bylaw, I mean, there's some, and I don't, this is kind of pedantic, but you can build a temporary apartment for your grandmother, but not your great grandmother. You can build one for your nephew, but not your cousin. What's the difference here? And the thing about, and this goes kind of unspoken, because maybe we can go back and look at the deliberations at town meeting when that bylaw was first kind of adopted, but what is the virtue of the family requirement? Why have that? What is the problem that solves? That would be something that I would be interested to hear people say. What is the difference between renting to your grandmother and renting to your best friend? Or someone who's just a normal tenant that you would get, if you were going to rent your apartment somewhere. The last thing that I would say is, we talked a little about the extension and removal requirements. I still think that's onerous and really, having a kind of a short term of the special permit, it's just another hurdle for people. The final thing, and this isn't, I think it's important, but it may not necessarily occur to people. The purpose of the bylaw, when we adopt new zoning, there's a purpose to it that says this is why we're doing this, and this is what we hope to accomplish with this. The most recent example obviously is the accessory dwelling unit proposal, which has 5 different purpose statements: increase the range of housing choices, encourage more energy efficient housing, develop units that are appropriate for households at various stages of life, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a make or break thing for the enforcement of the zoning, but it is a flag that's planted in the zoning code that says this is why we're doing this, and this is how you can judge the success or failure of this bylaw. If in a world in which the ADU bylaw passes and 10 years from now, the town planner looks and says, well, we really didn't increase the range of housing choices. Maybe we need to rethink this bylaw, or, maybe, anything like that. It's important to have a purpose statement in these things so that you can, it's not just that zoning just sits there and then it just is all the land and there's no.
Oh, did we lose Tim? Okay, well, I think he was getting close. We'll bring him back when he comes in. I noticed his screen was frozen. All right, well,
Should we allow Alex to comment on any of, or? speak to
No,
any of
I
those
don't
things?
think so. Well, Alice can finish up at the end, but I think we should hear the rest of the people first. Alex
sure.
can do a wind up.
I'm asking the chair.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Whiteside, would you like to comment at the end? Or did you have something you wanted to get to immediately?
Can I just make a suggestion though, since we lost Tim? It would
Yeah.
be good for Tim to be back before Mr. Whiteside responds to Tim's comments.
I'm happy
so-
to wait till the end.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Whiteside. I appreciate your flexibility. Okay. All right. Let's hear from the rest of the board, and then let's open it up to the public. Does anybody on the board want to speak to this temporary bylaw citizens amendment article?
Can I go ahead with just a short comment?
You should please.
Yeah, I really, the reason I asked if we could have Tim speak is I really appreciated his memo, and I
Mhm.
also appreciate his suggestion about waiting to take a position on this article until after town meeting. So I would like to make that suggestion because it seems to me otherwise it's, we all know that that the citizens petition grew out of sort of dueling or
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, Cheryl,
yeah.
if that brings the temperature down so we don't feel
Yeah.
like we need to come to a conclusion tonight. I just thought it was important for people to understand what both articles were because they're kind of related. But if that, I think, but if other board members agree with you, I'm flexible on that. But did you want to finish it further point?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one other, well, as I said, Tim, in terms of his comments about, whether it's, the revisions that this doesn't go far enough in what, in staff opinion, and that's my opinion as well. And I just want to make a comment again, like I did before, about the not allowing it in a detached structure that is in this one. So if there's some time for the folks who are the petitioners on this, and if it wouldn't be out of scope for them to really reconsider that, because I'm making my architectural pitch again. That, like an existing home, like where it makes sense to add on to it is not always as flexible as one might think. So in terms of the interior layout, like where their existing kitchen is, where their existing living room and stairs, and where the stair to the basement is, and so forth. Sometimes it's very challenging to have a location for an addition that makes sense architecturally on the inside and architecturally on the outside. And so I was trying to make the case before that detached can be a better architectural solution in some instances for that reason. So if this does come, to a point where we're going to be, taking a vote, and when we're taking a vote, I just wanted to put that point back out to Mr. Whiteside and the petitioners to consider again. But otherwise, that's it for tonight for me for that.
Okay, Tim Cherwinski, are you back? Did you want to?
I think so. I think so. Can you make me a panelist? Is that all right?
Yeah, Sean, can you help me? Promote to panelist. Okay, did that work, Tim? Can I see you? Can you unmute? Oh, there you are.
Unbelievable. I should have known that something was up when I stopped seeing people like nod at all of the astute points I was making, like, oh yeah. When did you lose me? I'm sorry about that.
Your screen was frozen, but we could hear you for a long time. And then,
Okay.
yeah, I think you kept saying you were at your last point. So I think you made 2 last points.
Yeah, so I just to sort of, in case my recommendation to you on what to do, did you get that? That if
please do
ADUs, yeah, so if the ADU bylaw passes at the special, I would recommend that you not recommend to town meeting that they pass this, because I think the ADU bylaw would supersede anything that would be in the temporary apartment bylaw. I think if ADUs fail at the special town meeting, then I think that the planning board should recommend that town meeting adopt this at the annual town meeting. Because, as I said, the changes are fine. It's just that because the ADU bylaw, in our opinion, is much better, that we should pass that. And so if that's no longer an option, you may as well make these, minor but positive changes to the temporary apartment bylaw. So sorry about that. It's that kind of week, gang. It's really bad.
Oh, I know, it's been a crazy week. Okay, so thank you, Tim, and thank you, Cheryl. And Kathleen, I see your hand is up. Did you want to talk?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Whiteside for deleting the requirement to name your children on the special permit. I thought that was great, and I appreciate that. And I support the idea that we hold off on this. We have a public hearing. We hear from the public as we are required to do, which is great, and hold off on making a final decision to see what happens at the special town meeting.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. Beeler?
Yes, thanks. I'm for, that sounds like a good plan to me. I do have a question though, Tim, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but your last statement about if it doesn't pass, this one would be good too. The only question I have is you just talked about a bunch of kind of fundamental things that are different between them and that this one would impose. Are you saying like it's better than nothing? Is that because there's some things in here that are just like fundamentally different, right? Like you kind of outlined.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is if the ADU bylaw fails at the special town meeting, it's not like we still have temporary apartments. Those aren't going anywhere because there's no action before town meeting to delete that or eliminate that bylaw. So we still have it. So if we don't have ADUs and we still have temporary apartments, we may as well make temporary apartments better. I think it still would be in need of improvement, again, for those fundamental reasons, but I don't think there's any sense in the planning board or town meeting, on principle, not improving the bylaw as it exists. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from on that, because they're like I said, they're fine changes, but they don't go nearly far enough is really my point.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Thanks.
So I appreciate everyone's comments. And I think actually this, this could stand alone, or it could stand beside the ADU. In other words, if the ADU article were to pass, I think that this would still offer an option for family. In other words, if the ADU were to pass with a cap of 10, then you know, a family member needed an AD, you know, a temporary apartment, they could still get one, and then this article would be improved for them. So I think this is a positive, you know, reviewing all of the changes that Alex made. I feel like, you know, expansion of caregivers, expansion to include additions, attached garage, caregivers, you know, nannies, you know, the termination, removing the stove and fridge. I'm surprised to hear from Tim saying that he doesn't like that, because we had heard so many times from Kathleen that it was just too wide open, that people, you know, had to do so much when they went to terminate the ADU. That was too costly. That was a big, I mean, this was like a year ago. Do you remember you said it was just so costly and cumbersome when the ADU was terminated? Wouldn't it be much easier if they just had to remove the stove or remove the fridge? They shouldn't have to renovate the whole place after ending these things. I feel like that was a big topic early on. I know we've been talking about this for a long time, so.
Well,
So-
I think it was more of an issue of the fact that you couldn't put a temporary apartment in anything. You needed to get a variance because you weren't allowed to do new construction. It had to already be in something that was built. And then you're supposed to submit to the ZBA a plan to show how this wing of whatever you've added to your house and you've gotten variance to build gets reincorporated into the house. So it's more than just taking out the stove. You have to show how you incorporate the wing back in, you know, so it's got a door and it's got, you know, it's got connectors or it's got whatever. So it's not merely just taking out the stove. I think what this attempt is done in this version with Mr. Whiteside is to say, no, you don't have to rebuild everything, but you just take the stove out.
Right.
So that's a difference than what was in the earlier version, which requires you to incorporate the wing back into the house.
Actually, in the current version, you have to submit plans that
Yeah,
show
right.
what it would look like with the kitchen
With
removed.
everything back in, yeah.
And what that would be used for within the house. Let's say it's an office, a family room, or something else.
Okay.
That's required
all right.
from the building, to the building department.
All right, so Meredith, did you have any comments before we allowed the public to speak? Okay.
No, I'm good with letting everyone else speak first.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on the citizens amendments to the temporary apartment bylaw? Let's see. I'm looking for hands. Carol Stalker, are you trying to raise your hand? It keeps fluttering. Hi, Carol. You're welcome to speak.
You know, I'm having trouble with this hand. I've tried to speak at the last two meetings I was at, and it didn't show up, or people said they saw it fluttering, so I'm fluttering.
Yes, well, I saw it fluttering this time, so thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. So I don't know, my hand doesn't seem to work right. I feel that I'm Carol Stalker, 291 Hillside Street. I'm a citizen. I feel a little bit at a loss because I'm not a techie and I'm not a lawyer. But as usual, I'll just speak from my heart. Tim kind of brought me up short when he was speaking. I wasn't going to say anything about the ADU bylaw, which is going to be voted on by the town meeting members in March, as opposed to the citizens petition, which will be voted on by the town meeting members in May. And so I wasn't going to mention the ADU, but then of March. But then Tim said, if we didn't have a far superior bylaw already on the table, I would say vote for the citizens petition. But we do have a far superior bylaw, so I don't think we should send the citizens petition forward. And what I heard when he was saying that is that they were competitive proposals, and if they're competitive, then you have to compare them. And I think they are competitive. I think that this May Citizens proposal that I signed, and that Alex Whiteside, who is a very, very knowledgeable zoning lawyer, wrote, was written in response to the ADU after Alex and Kathleen went through about 5 drafts of trying to come to an agreement of what should be in it and failing to agree. So so the planning board passed Kathleen's version, as well it should, because she's a planning board member, and Alex has lost a seat on the planning board. But Alex, as a citizen, wrote a kind of a competing version as a citizen, and it's the citizens version. And I think that that is a superior version. And why do I think it's superior? Well, because it's trying to do what the original goal was, which is to help families who have problems with illness, caretakers, childcare workers. But there was a lot of talk about if a child is injured in an accident and you need to hire a care worker to take care of that child, how do you go about getting it in the permit? There's an existing bylaw for all this, and you all said, well, it's a little onerous. What can we do to streamline it? And as Denny was saying, there was talk that you have to put in a kitchen, then you have to take out a kitchen. So Alex's response was, let's fix the existing bylaw. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, let's fix the existing bylaw. And so he said, this is what's wrong with the existing bylaw. We don't have to throw the baby out with the dishwater. We could just make these changes and it will be a better bylaw to help these families. Now, what happened with the ADU is it went in a totally different direction, which is it wasn't really about helping families. In some ways, by having a cap and making these people compete with people who are looking for to make a profit off of renting property, and also being in line, that it might make it harder for the families to help the theoretical child who's been injured in a sports accident, because they're in line behind the developers who own these properties and want to make money renting for what the market will bear to people who are not family members. And so it went off in a different direction. It became something totally different. And I showed the 2 versions to a friend of mine who's a very good lawyer. And she said, these 2 proposals have totally different goals. One has the goal of helping families, and one has a goal of increasing density in Milton and creating rental opportunities for people. And I don't understand why there's a tendency to try to not say they're 2 totally different bills with different goals. And I heard this when Tim was saying, now, what is the, well, he was saying basically that the idea of family as defined by the bylaw is archaic. Family can be anything. What is a family? The definition of family is exclusionary. What is the difference between renting to your grandmother and renting to your best friend? And that sounds very reasonable, but then I have to ask, well, what's the difference between renting to your grandmother and renting to some college students from Curry College? And the guy next door who has script and saved to own a single family home comes home one day and without any notification to him, his next door neighbor has for profit turned his family into a two family. And instead of renting it to his best friend, he's renting it to some kids from Curry College who can pay through the nose for it. And suddenly this neighborhood, especially if this cap of 10 per year doesn't hold because of the language in the bill, which lawyers I've showed this to suggested would not hold it. You would not keep the cap of 10 for the ADU challenge because of the language in the ADU bill. It could you could have neighborhoods changing very rapidly to two-family neighborhoods. There's nothing wrong with that. But are we trying to help families? Or are we trying to increase diversity and density in Milton? And if we're trying to do one, why are we pretending we're trying to do the other? It's confusing everybody. People don't understand this bill. And if the town meeting goes ahead, the members pass it, they're going to hear from constituents who say, this isn't what I thought it was. They're going to say, you know, my neighborhood has changed. And I wasn't expecting this. I thought this was a bill that was going to increase affordable housing. And instead we have a bigger affordable housing deficit. I thought this was a bill that was going to help people with their grandmothers. Instead, I have college students living next door. There is, I think, a real issue with misrepresenting what the ADU is. And the reason why I like the citizens petition better is that it is what it says it is. It's modest. It tries to help families, and what you see is what you get. And it's very clear. It's transparent. So that was my react, and I think very highly of Tim. But what he said made me think this. This is not what I was going to say, but that's my reaction. So that's what I have to say.
Well, thank you, Carol Starker. And I just want to disclose that I'm a member of the Garden Club, and Carol Starker is also a member of the Milton Garden Club. I just wanted to disclose that. So thank you so much, Ms. Starker. Thank you for participating tonight. Cheryl has her hand raised, and then we want to open it up to the attendees.
Yeah, I
Hi,
just
Cheryl.
wanted to make two comments in response to Ms. Stocker. I just wanted to point out that currently anyone in town can rent their house to whomever they want, including college students. So if I wanted to move to Florida and rent my house out to 6 college students or however many people constituted, I can rent my house out. There's no regulations that limit who I can rent my house to. So the reason I point that out is because a developer, in order to be able to have an ADU, the developer would have to be living on the property. So this concern about developers coming in and just renting properties out is a little, I think, misguided, because only the developer would have to live in the property and then rent out part of it. So I just want to make sure people understand, and so that there's not misunderstandings about what is currently in our bylaw and in the proposed ADU one. Thanks.
Okay. Before we get to you, Kathleen, I just wanted to respond to that. So I do hear what you're saying, Cheryl, about that a developer would have to live there. But what you could see happening is that we would have, you know, different types of situation. You could have somebody buy a house who, you know, with the understanding that they're going to rent out market rate in order to, you know, pay the mortgage. And it's just a different kind of buyer than the, you know, neighborhood is used to. The neighborhood is used to, you know, single family houses, families come in and they buy the house, they stay there 30 or 50 years. But now you have a new person coming in, buying it. It's more like a 2-family where it's, you know, you're trying to get market rate in order to pay the mortgage. It's a whole different, just a little bit of a different feel. So it's not necessarily the developer, it's the different It's just a bit of a different formula. It's not a bad
Well-
formula. It's not a wrong formula. And it's also our current housing. You don't generally buy a house in Milton as a rental house because the mortgage is just too high to pay. I mean, our rentals right now are just going crazy. So maybe now is not the right moment to make this point. But generally speaking, you wouldn't buy a single family house in Milton as a rental investment property because the rent you would get is not necessarily going to cover the mortgage. So houses are usually bought by single families in these single family houses are usually bought by single families for that. But having said that, we do have a ton of multi-generational households across the town. And we do have a lot of people who aren't even family living together in our houses across the town too. So, so I just wanted to add that to the discussion. Ms. O'Donnell, did you want to contribute?
I just wanted to say one thing is that we had drafted a one-page explanation of the accessory dwelling unit. It's on the agenda to discuss, and perhaps the distribution of that particular piece of paper would help in explaining the difference between the two. I think that I agree that there's some confusion. I also would point out this accessory dwelling unit is not meant to accomplish the same things as the temporary apartment was. That Carol is absolutely right about that. But I think we need to have that sheet go out, and I would hope that at the end of this meeting that we would agree to allow that to be circulated.
All right, yep, that's on our agenda toward the end to discuss that. Okay, all right. Meredith and Rich, if it's okay with you, we'll just go back to the attendees. Thank you. Okay, Peggy. Good evening, Peggy. Hello, would you like to join us?
Good evening.
Good evening. Could we get your name and street address?
Yes, I'm Peggy Chow. First, I wanted to thank you. This is a wonderful discussion, and everybody brought to the table all the different good points. So it's very educational for me. So I'm just a citizen. So what I wanted to say is I'm Peggy Chow. I'm 73 years old and live on 690 Brook Road with my husband for the past 36 plus years. And what I would like to do is open the door, and I wanted to see the mountains. And speaking in favor of a proposed citizens petition to the existing temporary apartment bylaw, which the town meeting will vote on May of this year, not this March 14. And I'm speaking to town meeting members and citizens, and I do hope that you hear me when I say I feel the citizens petition zoning proposal would best help us to keep living in our own Milton homes. I think this will make it easier for families who want to have interior apartments for family members and or caregivers. So I do want to clarify, when I talk about caregivers, I was thinking about taking care of the elderly, taking care of the family, taking care of the young children. I'm not sure. I heard earlier the caregiver was something to take care of the properties. So I just want to clarify that. My husband and I would love the town's quiet greenery, and this will fix problem with the town's temporary apartment bylaw. Like many of you brought up, it's a good opportunity to make some amendments without adding more population density. I do wanted to emphasize, a lot of us, we choose Milton. It's because we're 8 miles from downtown Boston, but then we feel like we're living in the country. So the population density, just speaking for myself, that will be, something to consider. And this particular proposal is precise and not open to very varying legal interpretations, right? this is like Tim mentioned earlier, this is an opportunity, if we can go ahead, amend and make the necessary changes, it's for the better. It is, we're moving forward. So I hope the town meeting members will vote yes for this citizens petition in May instead of a zoning proposal before them in March, which is too broad with unforeseeable consequences for all of us. And I want to say thank you for letting me speak.
Well, thank you. Thank you for participating tonight. Thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay. Did we have anyone else from the public who would like to talk about the citizen amendments to the temporary apartment bylaw? Okay. I see Maggie. Good evening, Maggie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you tonight?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Hi, my name is Maggie Oldfield, and I live at 397 Hillside Street. And I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 5. I have many roles in my life, but the most significant one is being part of a family. My husband and I were both raised in Milton and decided to raise our kids here. And we are fortunate that our family, including both of our mothers, my 3 siblings, and their families, all call Milton home. My mother is 86 and has COPD. She is on oxygen and has limited mobility with 2 bad knees. My mother-in-law has bravely dealt with MS nearly her whole life and has just finished a year of chemo and radiation. I had an older sister who had special needs and needed significant care. And I have an 11-year-old niece with Down syndrome. All our needs vary today and will most certainly change in the coming years. I tell you all this because I'm personally familiar with the needs of our residents, as well as the costs that are associated with them. And they need to be balanced with the costs of living in Milton. So I'm really sympathetic. However, wherever you decide to live, you know what you're buying into, and you make your choice accordingly. If you like what you see, you buy. If you don't, you move on. And when we all freely made the decision to live and buy in Milton, we understood what we were getting. We must not forget that Milton is a town of single-family homes that allows for other uses by special permit. And I'm very familiar with the special permit because I have a special permit to operate a business here. When we move here, we know where the commercial districts are. We know what businesses are here and which ones thankfully are not. We know the neighborhoods that are within walking distance to schools, and we know which neighborhoods have larger lots and higher taxes. And we know the location of homes of smaller lots with smaller units, with less property maintenance and lower taxes. And we know how far we are from Boston or from the beach. And we made our personal choice to live in our neighborhood that meets our personal needs. However, there's always room for improvement, and I don't approve drastic changes, but I do approve changes for the better. And that is why I'm one of the sponsors of the citizens petition to amend our temporary apartment bylaw. Even though the process to get a permit to have a temporary apartment, it's not overly onerous, but some of the requirements are. And I'm really happy to see the following amendments. Number 1, the name of the tenant is no longer required. Alerting the code enforcement officer of the name change is an unnecessary step for both the homeowner and the town. Number 2, the definition of a caregiver has been expanded to include a nanny or a child care provider. Number 3, in addition to your house, an attached garage can be used as a temporary apartment, and construction of new additions will be allowed. Number 4, to renew the permit, you only have to inform the building inspector. There's no requirement to have a hearing with the ZBA. Number 5, when you sell your house, you don't have to remove any improvements that were made except removing the oven and the fridge. Number 6, when the house is sold, the new owner can continue with the permit as long as they inform the inspector. And number 7, which is the most important, is there's not a cap to the number of units allowed. A property owner does not have to compete with any other residents or developers to be able to apply. This will allow families, including mine, to be able to create spaces when needed. I foresee in the future that my mother-in-law will need an ADU or a caregiver, I mean, not a unit for a caregiver as my mother might need. So I don't want to be competing with myself at 2 different properties in town. These changes are great improvements to a bylaw that already has a proven history. As I understand it, there are about 30 of them already listed with the town. As I previously mentioned, we all bought into the same neighborhood with the same understanding of what we bought into. We accepted the implied covenant. So neighbor notification is important. The initial process is one of collaboration. It's about being a good neighbor. And if for some reason neighbors can't agree, which I know that more than anybody, the ZBA is there to help find reasonable solutions. There are so many wonderful reasons why we all decided to live here, and being able to have a voice in the process of improving outdated bylaws is one of them. Because this is a bylaw that needs improving and will not change the character of our town, I kindly ask that you support it. And to Carol's point, she's much more eloquent than I could ever be. I did take a little offense to what Tim had to say about the ADU being a far superior bylaw. I don't agree with that. And many, many, many other residents that I've talked to don't agree with that either. In my work, I talk to so many people, just regular residents of the town, and they know nothing about this ADU bylaw, and they're genuinely concerned. And I just think that there's too much confusion. And I think these amendments to our temporary apartment bylaw is a great start. And I hope you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your comments. See, do we have any, I'm just going to check. Do we have anyone else from the public that would like to raise their hand? Go ahead, Cheryl, while we wait for the public.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've made the suggestion about information being sent. The confusion piece of it is because, zoning is complicated, and what's included and what's allowed can be difficult to understand. And I drafted that information sheet several weeks ago with the intent that it would help clarify for folks. And it's getting really late and close to town meeting, and it's going out much later than I had hoped it would. I know from the work that I did on behalf of the Master Plan Committee and the Planning Board for Milton Village, that having the webinar, having information sheets, having Q&A out there in advance was helpful. And so I really want to make sure that we get to that discussion. And the other thing that's really important is the presentation to town meeting, and the clarity that can come from the presentation to town meeting, so people know what they are actually voting for and what it will do is really important. So I do want to have an opportunity to talk about that tonight as well.
Yeah, that's on our agenda during old business. We'll talk about that. Okay, Maggie, your hand is still up. I didn't know if.
Sorry, no.
That's okay. You're all set, or did you have a final point?
No, I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? I know Alex Whiteside will have some final points. Okay, we see Matt Lagan. Good evening, Matt. You are welcome to unmute.
Good evening. I'm sorry, I'm using my husband's computer.
Oh, that's quite all
My
right.
name is actually Katie Lagan, and I live at 544 Brook Road and have for many, many years. I grew up in the house that I live in currently. And I enjoyed all of the pluses that Milton has to offer. And I echo Carol and Maggie's concerns. But I wanted to add one more thing that I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talking about. One of the things that we talk about a lot here in Milton is affordable housing. So if you fast forward a number of years in these houses that have added ADUs, if this bylaw goes through, they're going to sell again and they're going to be even more expensive than they were before we added the ADUs. So we'll have an exacerbated small a affordable problem. And that's one of the things I'm thinking about in terms of this. There won't be any smaller houses for people to buy as, first-time home buyers. So that's really all my comments. I don't want to repeat all the other things that everyone else has said, so.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for participating. Thank you for coming out tonight and joining our discussion. It's always nice to hear from different people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, all right. Did we have anyone else from the public that would like to speak on the citizen article to amend the temporary apartment bylaw, except for Alex? I'm gonna save Alex for last. Anyone else from the public? Okay, all right, Mr. Whiteside, did you have some further comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
And that was not me. Who did-
Oh, I was gonna say, did you get a puppy or something?
Cindy, maybe, sorry, excuse me one moment, Alex. Maybe you could ask, I see there's a number of people who haven't muted that
Yeah.
spoke. If they can mute themselves, I think that would be beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
All right. I heard Tim say that I didn't discuss the ADU article to begin with. Because as Carol pointed out, what I was proposing, what the citizens are proposing are amendments to the temporary apartment bylaw, and they are different than just creating housing, which is seemingly the purpose of the ADU. But I heard Tim say that the current ADU proposal is far superior to the proposal that the citizens proposed. And I would suggest that the current ADU proposal is replete with error and needs significant amendment before it should be acceptable for consideration by town meeting. And at the planning board hearing, I pointed out a number of the problems, and I was told that this is just a confirmatory hearing and we can't make any changes. And so the article remains in terrible shape and should never be approved and is definitely not superior. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But I do think that planning director was absolutely off base in saying what a great article it was, because it isn't a great article. It needs a lot of work. That said, I think that you should consider the reason for the citizens' petition, and it's to make things better for the people in the town, and it's to make things better for the elder people and for younger families, and it's a good article, and you know, whatever the merits or demerits of the ADU, this article should stand on its own feet, because that's the feet that it has. It's an article that addresses problems that the town has, and they need to be addressed, and I hope that you support the article.
Okay.
And I'm sorry for getting so worked up about the ADU article, but I really do think it's a missed opportunity, and it is not a great article at all, in my view, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Whiteside. And I didn't know if Tim wanted to respond. I
would like
imagine.
I would like to have a statement before Tim responds. You know, we ask for decorum in all of our comments here. And while there's differences of agreement on ADU versus temporary apartment, and we've seen that over and over and over again, I don't think it's right to have that kind of comment directed at our Director of Planning and Community Development, when he's provided us with his guidance on what he thinks as a professional planner that he would recommend. And that's what we asked him for, is his recommendation. And if people disagree with his recommendation, that's fine. Everyone has a right to disagree. But to disparage him based on his recommendation is wrong.
I didn't know if Tim wanted a moment to talk. No pressure. I just didn't know.
Yeah,
I just didn't
you know,
want to.
I'm not, you know, and I heard some folks say they took offense to my comments. I mean, if we're gonna have differences of opinion over policy and regulation, and, you know, I'm not out here to offend people. I'm out here to kind of tell you what the consequences of your land use regulation proposals are going to be.
Okay.
So, you know, I understand people feel passionately about this. These are issues that I feel passionately about as well. I don't live in Milton, but I approach this the same way here in Boston where I live. So, you know, I hope folks can try to, you know, take a little bit of a step back, and we can be you know, respectful to each other, because I try to keep that respect and professionalism in all of my activities here as planning director.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for thoughtful discussion. I noticed Kathleen has her hand up. Kathleen, did you want to?
Well, other than sort of, you know, echoing the comments that Tim has made, and I'm not taking offense at the accusation that my ADU article is deficient in so many ways. But I would point out the fact that people have talked about density, and I don't understand from my perspective, what's the difference of density when it's a family member or not a family member? If you have a temporary apartment and you add somebody and that's a person, that's density, whether it's your relative or not. So I don't see as going back to what the comment has been made about it's now a two-family. Well, it is a two-family. The fact that the person in the other unit is a family member doesn't change that. And it's still the same density. So I'm hoping that that we will go on to this meeting, get to the end, talk about how our presentation is going to be happening at the special town meeting, and that we will hand out that information sheet, which I think would be helpful for people, as I've said, I guess, too many times already tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whiteside, I noticed that your hand is up. Did you intend to take it down, or did you have a final comment? So, because we're going to wrap up the public hearing soon. Did anyone else from the public want to speak before we wrap up the public comment? Okay. Oh, I see Erin Bradley. Good evening, Erin. Good evening.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good
Okay,
evening.
great. Thank you so much. My name is Erin Bradley. I live at 28 Lincoln Street. I've been listening to tonight's debate and conversation and input, and it has all been very eye-opening and wonderful to hear from so many neighbors. Madam Chair, I had a question for you, actually. When you spoke earlier about who buys homes in our town,
Mhm.
and you were talking about how people can't afford to buy single-family homes, and if it was a two-family home, then people might be able to afford it or may not. I was very unsure what you were meaning about that. So could you clarify what you meant about people buying homes in our town? It was a while.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what I was responding to. I'm sorry. It was a long meeting and I'm not sure the context of that. I forget. It was
Okay.
in response to something that Cheryl said that was in response to something that another speaker said. And I don't even remember exactly the context.
It's okay. I just wanted to
Um,
say, I think that those of us that I've been listening to this evening are all people that have lived in their homes for a very, very, very long time. And those
Right.
people probably bought their homes for $11,000 or less. I have a couple clients in town that are very proud to tell me about what they paid for their homes, and my mouth just drops. And I bought my home here about 7 years ago, and I could never afford to live in this town now. So I was intrigued about what you were saying about who can buy homes in Milton and how we buy homes as single family homes. I look every week in the Milton Times at the cost of homes. And I just want to say, if there is a way for folks to actually be able to afford to live in our wonderful town, that's not a bad thing. And even if that brings different demographics to our town, that's not a bad thing. And so I'm not going to speak on where I stand on either of these positions because they have come before the warrant committee and you can all review my votes there. But it's very fascinating to me to listen to what is being said about where our town is, especially given the presentation that happened 2 nights ago, where we are basically under a mandate of our state legislature to have more density in areas that folks don't want density. So just thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to clarify what you meant by that. And I know it's been a long meeting and I appreciate you allowing me to have this opportunity. So thank you and good luck, everybody.
Sure, thank you. And I didn't mean that one buyer was a bad buyer or a good buyer or anything like that. Or I was just saying that, it's just it's just different ways of doing things. And you'd have different pressure and different, different pressures on the economy. When you make zoning changes, it has impacts on who buys and how they buy and how they do things and just changes and differences, but I didn't mean it in any negative way. All right, so with that, Alex, I see your hand is up and I'm about to close the public hearing. Any last final comment?
Excuse me, just as a point of order,
Yeah, I'm just trying to
would
close
we
the
be
public hearing.
closing the public hearing? Why wouldn't we be leaving it open? Because
Okay,
we're going to be having comments potentially on the citizens petition later on after the after the spring meeting. It seems to me that we should keep this open until we see what happens in a couple of weeks.
that's great. That's a great idea. Okay.
Then we would continue it to March 24th.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, then I would make a motion to continue the public hearing for the citizens petition to March 24th at 7:05.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so now we discussed, did anybody else want to discuss this before we close this topic on the agenda tonight? I just wanted to say that, I can understand if other people aren't ready, but I think this is progress. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it could stand alone or with the ADU. I think it's good to see this. I thought we had really good public comment tonight. So I think this is all positive and I don't see it as controversial. I think it's all beneficial. Everything moves in the right direction. So That's.
I agree, Jenny. I just think that it would be helpful to keep it open because maybe some people from the public will want to say something after the ADU article.
And I'm not
That's
disagreeing with
voted.
that. We're just discussing it.
Yeah.
I'm in full agreement with you. I like keeping it open to the 24th.
Yeah.
I just want to state my feelings
Yeah.
on this. So that's all.
Yeah, no.
We're in agreement. Okay. Okay, did anybody else want to state anything before we close this topic and move on to the next topic tonight?
Don't we have to take a vote?
We have to take a vote to
So
on the
I was just
continue.
finishing the discussion before we take the vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Anybody want to say anything before we finish the vote? Thank you.
I just think it's a positive also that it's an improvement to our current article, and that's pretty simple, straightforward.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. Rich, you're a little quiet. I just want to make sure we're good. Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. So we'll finish the vote. Alphabetical order. Rich Beeler. We're going to continue the meeting. So Rich, are you?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Gaius,
Yes.
Ms. Swenson, yes. Okay, on to the scenic road. 1200 Brush Hill Road, scenic road. I was hoping Tim could lead the discussion. Do we want to invite any attendees over? Oh, and I just want to thank the public for participating tonight. And Ned Corcoran, can we promote to panelist? I'm promoting you.
Ned looks like he already has the ability to speak here, so I think you
Okay.
should be all set.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, Mr. Corcoran. And I just wanted to thank the public for their participation in our public meeting on the citizens petition. Thank you all. It was a very thoughtful conversation. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Corcoran.
Is he still here?
Go wild for my computer to allow me back in as a panelist. Thank you for inviting me in.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm here with a petition. It was, I framed it as a preliminary application for modifications to stone walls, et cetera, at 1200 Brush Hill Road. It's the Brush Hill Road Care Center, Brush Hill Care Center. It's a large care facility that sits down below Fuller Village, next to Flatley soccer field, and has been through several hands for a long time. It was owned by Mr. Flatley. It was developed by Mr. Flatley as a nursing home. It's recently been purchased by my client, which is Bravo Mass 2 LLC, operating as Brush Hill Road Care Center, and they've been slowly bringing the facility back to a much better facility. It had gone through some tough times under previous ownership. This ownership group bought it about 5 or 6 years ago, and they've been slowly making improvements inside and trying to make improvements to grounds outside. Inadvertently, last year, they cut down 3 trees and removed some portions of what they think was damaged stone wall that were along the edge of Brush Hill Road within the town's right of way. I didn't realize that where the property line was when they did it. The 3 trees were dying or dead, and they consider them to be dangerous. And the wall situation is very poor. Was very low, and in many instances where people turning in and out of the facility were actually damaging their cars because the wall was so low, not visible, and so close to the edge of the roadway. And so what we wanted to do as a starting point was to suggest either a site walk, or perhaps the board appoint 1 or more members to walk the property with us and come up with some preferred options to how we might replace those trees, what might be an appropriate way to repair or replace sections of stone wall that have been removed. We didn't want to get heading down the line with something that might not otherwise be subject to approval. And so that was our preliminary starting point was, can we meet with one or more members of the board? The board would like to have a site walk. We can walk it. We can show you exactly where things happened. And I can share a screen now and show preliminarily what we are talking about. But then thought perhaps we could work with the board on some solutions.
Thank you. I'd like to see the visuals. I did drive to the site today, so I'm a little bit familiar with this property.
I'm sure, because you live right up around the corner.
That's right.
So this is a site plan of the property. It's a large property with a huge building. The building was at one time a rectory, a seminary for priests in the Catholic Church. It was converted to a nursing home and has been operated now by several. Along the edge of the property is Brush Hill Road. There are two entries in. There's a secondary entrance here, and then the primary entrance comes here. The soccer fields are just off to the right. There were 3 trees that we removed within, outside of the property line, inside of the stone wall. And then a portion of these areas of stone walls that are really in poor shape had been removed as well. There were 3 other trees further up towards the Brush Hill, the Fuller Village edge of the property that are inside the stone wall that will also be removed, but they're not within the town's right of way. I can stop share and then reshare a couple of photographs. This is one of the trees that was removed. It was obviously in very, very poor shape. And this is sort of an example of what the wall, to the extent there's a wall along the property edge, has kind of devolved to. And so so the notion would be that we want to do a simple repair replacement of the wall and an appropriate location along the edge of the roadway so that it's safe for motorists, and then separately a plan to replace at least those 3 trees, perhaps inside the property line. One of the issues I think there is that there's a very narrow green strip between the wall and the traveled way. Those trees, subject to plow damage, they might be subject to salt damage with winter conditions, etc. So I think it might be in a location where it's difficult for those trees to thrive. We'd want to make sure the new trees that would be replacing would have the ability to thrive.
Yeah, there's some safety issues there. I imagine we don't want cars to hit the stone wall or the trees. So I know it's a tricky spot.
Yeah, so, sorry, Denny.
I was wondering if they had a proposed plan or
We
they
haven't
looking for our
gotten there. One of the issues that there is a new general manager who's just been hired recently. Brian Freeman, who had been there, was the one who had overseen the removal, is no longer there. And so the new team wants to sort of get their feet on the ground and understand what really would the board like to see in terms of a wall replacement, a tree replacement, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, Denny, so just to add a little bit of context to this application, and Ned kind of calls it a preliminary application, which I think is the right way to think about it. We're all unfortunately familiar with the situation at 8 Parkwood Drive that happened a few years ago, which is, on its face, not dissimilar to the situation where, you had, we're basically, this isn't a scenic road application. This is, hey, we cut down some trees and now we need to get our scenic road permit. I think the similarities kind of end there. I think that when you look at, the condition of the wall, when you look at the condition of the trees in those photographs, I believe it. this was an inadvertent kind of thing. I think the ultimate kind of impacts are not nearly as great as what happened on Parkwood Drive, where we lost, significant numbers of trees, off of town-owned land and really, required extensive mitigation, which I think the board imposed. That being said, I think, we want to make sure that we enforce our regulations and everyone follows the rules and no one gets away with not following the rules. And so Ned has presented kind of, a recounting of what happened. And I think what now, and I think his suggestion for a site walk is a good one. I've spoken with the tree warden about this. I've spoken with the chair of the historical commission, also with Meredith, who's a member of the historical commission. None of those officials or commissions have formally looked at this because, quite frankly, there's not much to look at except for what's already happened. So I think, per our regulations, the planning board does need to get the input of those, of the tree warden, of the conservation commission, and the Shade Tree Advisory Commission per our new updated regulations. So I think we should think about, how that input, comes. I think it may make sense to invite all of those folks to a site walk. And if not, have a discussion right on site, then at least sort of send everyone home and sort of, bring the suggestions and the commentary, because I think, in terms of, the mitigation for the trees that have been taken down, I think, based on what I've seen and I don't know if Branch is here, but we've talked about this, if they had come in with the scenic road application and said, we need to take down these trees, these are dead, probably would have given it to them in a snap. So it's more along the lines of, okay, you didn't follow the rules. What do we do here? And I think there's an opportunity to really make that, an even more lovely stretch of Brush Hill Road. I think that Ned's point about some of the safety concerns about the wall are very valid. It's not in really great shape. I think this is an opportunity to make it look nicer and safer. And I think also, the placement of any new trees, where they would be in a position. So it's an unfortunate thing that happened, but I do think it's an opportunity to really make some really great improvements. And so I would definitely second the idea of taking a site walk. You'll go down there and see that it's, you can imagine why cars would run over those rocks and plows would hit those trees. It's a tough part. I've gone down there and gotten out of my car and been like, whoa, watch out. So we'll want to make sure we keep that in mind. But I think seeing it, would go a long way, and we can invite the other boards and kind of, prep them for providing some input.
Are there any pictures of the wall from before, 5-10 years ago, to just sort of give us a sense of what they were like?
I've got one picture that, oh shoot, no, doing the wrong thing. Let me share screen again and see if I can. You see that?
Yeah.
That's roughly the condition of the wall as I've known it for a while. I can't say I don't have any evidence of what it might have looked at 5 or 10 years ago. I don't know whether folks in the town would have some archives that would show that, but that's roughly the condition. It's pretty beat up. It's pretty poor. It's a very narrow entry and exit out to Brush Hill Road. If I stop share and go back to the plan, you can see how the property line comes in, and Brush Hill Road right of way is much wider right at this area. So the road sort of, but the stone wall comes right in, right along the edge of that driveway. And because of its condition, its height, it was not really visible, and a lot of cars were being damaged as they were coming in or out of this property because of that, the condition. And I think the idea was to remove it and just make it safer. And I probably believe that the property line was, was close to the edge of the street, as you can imagine. But clearly, when the survey was done, you can see that the survey of the property line is inside of the wall, and it sort of drifts away from Brush Hill Road as you move sort of towards the north.
All right, well, I'll be interested to hear what the other committees think, but I do think it might make sense to bring the trees inside the wall a little bit more. But I'll wait to hear from the Historic Commission and the Conservation Commission, but just for their survival and, you know, ability to thrive. And it seems like there is room for that.
Yeah, Denny, if I can, so the Google Street View is from 2019, so 2.5 years ago. I'm going to share my screen. I mean, you can see that the wall was, you know, I mean, Ned showed the kind of pile of rubble. I mean, the wall was clearly a wall, you know, as recently as then. You can sort of see it here, obviously. So that's going to be something that, you know, we'll want to have that, you know, replaced. You know, if there's an issue with its kind of location and it needs to be tucked in or moved in some way, I mean, we can talk about that. But anyway, it was very clearly a wall that looked, you know, pretty nice and functioned how we often see these walls function, you know, in driveways. I think the thing that we may want to kind of start to talk about is, you know, there's a very kind of clear, you know, line where you get the sort of manufactured modern wall and it just sort of tails off into, you know, the pile of rocks, you know, down over here. So, you know, when I say, you know, opportunity, you know, there's an opportunity to maybe, you know, make that a little bit more integrated, you know, and sort of solve the problems of, you know, what's the best way, you know, for vehicles to get in and out of this, you know, facility, you know, keeping the integrity of the wall in place. You know, it's a crappy situation that, you know, was kind of torn down in that way, but also, you know, those stones are still there. So, you know, we've got, you know, the material to work with. So, you know, that's something that, you know, you know, the design of that, I think, is going to be, you know, the big kind of lift for this project is, you know, how do we get the wall to function the way that the facility needs it to, while still, you know, obviously making it, you know, fit in with the historic fabric that the regulations are trying to get after.
Thank you for those visuals. That was helpful.
I think the site walk with the various commissions would be great if we could get that scheduled. I think that would be a good next step.
I would agree. I would recommend that you do that. And I would be good anytime after next weekend. The next 2 weekends are bad weekends for me. I've got a family funeral down in New York a week from Saturday. So between now and then I couldn't do it, but the following weekend or anytime after that, it's convenient for the boards, would be great.
And the snow will have melted, so we can actually see what we're looking at.
Okay.
Oh, Meredith is thinking that we're not going to get any more snow. Don't cross your fingers.
True. True.
Okay, yeah, so I could do, you know, 19th, 26th or after, so let us know. Do we want to try to grab a date now, or do we want to,
I'm just going to tell you, I will be away the weekend of the 19th. We're talking weekends, right?
Yep.
So I will be out of town that weekend.
Do we want to look at the 26th?
So Denny, if, you know, because we want to get,
Oh, yeah, get the other
you know,
committees.
4 other officials and boards, I think maybe kind of figuring this out offline is probably makes sense.
Okay.
What I'll say is, because, you know, we've got a public hearing open, we might as well keep it open. Ned, I'm going to take a look at the regulations in the office. I may need a letter from the applicant, sort of.
That's what I was just gonna, that's why I raised my hand, is that we have a time limit under that bylaw of 21 days, I believe it is. And so we ran into this the last time. We want to make
So
sure we covered that.
yeah, we'll want to get an extension letter. So Ned, we can coordinate on that.
That's
Great.
fine. That's fine.
That's all I was gonna say.
Great minds. So if, I mean, you know, we'll probably wind up needing to, you know, have a little bit more time than this, but maybe it just makes sense to continue to the 24th and see where we stand.
Okay,
Sounds good.
sounds good.
Do you need a motion?
Do we need a
I
motion
don't,
to
you do.
continue? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to continue to the 24th. Anyone want to so
I'll
move?
make a motion to continue the hearing at 1200 Marshall Road till the 24th
You want to
Okay,
say
anyone-
7:10?
at 7:10.
Anyone want a second?
Second,
All in favor? Rich Beeler,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes,
Ms. O'Donnell,
yes.
Mr. Gaius,
Yes,
Denise Swenson, yes. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Corcoran.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, have a nice night.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have our final agenda item, old business discussion of town meeting zoning articles, which we created so we could talk about Cheryl's information sheet. So, see, it's 9 o'clock. I had some comments. We could walk through a lot of them.
did others have comments as well? Just-
Okay, I guess Meredith was nodding, so the two of us have some comments. I don't know if Kathleen or Rich have comments.
Should
I do
we
not.
pull it up? Should we pull it up on the screen?
Sure.
yeah, that'd be great.
Tim, do you have it? Or do you want me to?
If
don't
you've
have
got
it
it
open.
at your fingertips, I don't have it. Let me see if it's in the folder.
I can open it. I don't have it open at the moment, but I can.
No, I've got it.
Okay. I was trying to get this to be a one pager. It's a one pager, two-sided. So, I think a lot of people don't even know that we have a temporary apartment bylaw, in terms of the confusion. So that's why I did lay out in the beginning that we do have that. I think a lot of people probably didn't know or don't know that our current bylaws allow renting, to lodgers. I think that's a surprise to people, a lot of people, when they don't realize that. So I just thought it was important to kind of get that background in place. And the fact that, we do have temporary apartments already, and whether, let's call it a temporary apartment or an accessory dwelling unit, they are in essence the same kind of units, right? So the same type of use. So that's why I thought it was important to put that in the beginning. And then as far as the need, I wanted to lay the background, because doing the revision, whether it really has been something, as I think Tim pointed out, or maybe April did in our last hearing on this, that it's something that's been recommended in plans in Milton for 20 years. And so, it's important to really say why we're doing it, which is the need, and what the benefits. So that's all really sort of the background. So page 1 is the background as far as I was kind of thinking. And then page 2 is really more of the trying to be very succinct in what it does, right? And maybe what it doesn't do too, really. And then a little bit of the background into, this is a topic, as we've talked about, that it's in the region, but not just in the region, it's far beyond the region. I attended a White House webinar on ADUs. I think maybe Kathleen did too, not long
Yeah,
ago.
I attended that too.
Oh, did
Yeah.
you? Good.
Yeah.
I find it, when I first attended a different one on housing, on expanding affordable housing, I thought it was very interesting, and they assemble some really top-notch speakers. Anyway, so, it's being looked at many different levels, but I just focused here on the regional. So anyway, we talked about ARP being very interested in ADUs and, how Tim talked about California and Oregon, but I just kept it here to the local. Anyway, so that's the overall. And as I said before, I just think it's really important to get something out to town meeting members, to the warrant committee, to the select board, that puts forth something in a summary. Zoning language is not always clear in my mind. You have to really dig through it to understand what you're trying to do and what it really does and doesn't do, because the legal language in it.
All right, well, I think it's a little tricky. I know you gave this to us, I think it was 2 weeks ago, right before our meeting, and I wasn't able to study it before that meeting. And because of our open meeting laws, we need to do these things together. So, but I did spend a great deal of time today, looking this over, and I do have comments, but I'm kind of acknowledging that, we've had a hard time coming to consensus as a group of 5 on a lot of these areas. So it's a little bit of a challenge, because I think the document leaves out some points. So I was trying to think of a solution. We could kind of walk through and try to fix everything to the point where we come to consensus. Or maybe we could, have a majority opinion and a minority opinion.
Danny, one thing I was thinking is, it's really intended to be a summary of what the article is, and not to take away the reasons or the issues that you and Meredith have that have caused you to vote against it. But it's not really supposed to represent the debate. It's really supposed to represent what's going forward to town meeting. And the debate, will happen. So it's really meant to be and we haven't really done this that often, and I'm not trying to dismiss your comments, but it's meant to represent what the board voted to do, right? Just like if it were a 5-0 vote, we wouldn't necessarily put in, the comments that we heard about that were, people were concerned about. So and I recognize it's a little bit of an odd situation to ask you to support sending something out that you didn't support as the article. But I really do feel like it needs to represent the majority vote, the article that's forward. And so, and I tried not to have a lot of commentary about it, I tried to keep it as to what it was doing. If some of the commentary is you think not accurate, if Kathleen feels or Tim feels or Rich feels is not accurate, or Meredith feels is not accurate. But I mean, this is, what we've been talking about is why to do it, and the benefits of it are not actually the language, right? But it is all of the background that caused me, and I believe Rich and Kathleen, to support it. So that's, since it's representing the article and not the debate. Anyway, that's just kind of my thought.
I know
about
it's
it.
tricky. It's just, I mean,
Yeah, it is.
It spells out all the positives of the article, and I understand why you would do that. But, it doesn't really touch on, the topics that I raised or Meredith raised or the citizens raised in the whole public process. I recognize that the 3 members voted it forward. I respect democracy. You only need a majority, it moves forward. But the goal was to debate this on town meeting floor. I respect that.
Mhm.
I, you know, I mean, we can try to walk through and try to make it as accurate as, you know, you could hear out my points. But I mean, I just think that, you know, we haven't, you know, we didn't really elaborate on the, you know, special permit versus as of right. I know you mentioned it, but, so, I
Right,
mean,
so I mentioned that what it is now and what this does without really commenting on it, right? I tried not to say whether it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying what it does, right? That's because I was trying to be as factual about that as possible. So like
Well,
the
I think we
goals and-
it's tried to be neutral. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
the board voted for it, a majority voted for it. We have this article on the warrant. And so I sort of thought the purpose of it was to sort of explain, because there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of, you know, discussion, and that a piece that says, okay, this is what the article says, and this is what it's, you know, trying to do, and trying to make it as neutral as possible, I think is helpful to town meeting. We all got a letter from Ned and the hospital explaining the memory care unit bylaw. And so I don't see, if there's something in here that you think is sort of egregiously wrong, well, then that's great. We should fix that. But I mean, if your general feeling, Denny, and is that we don't want to send it out because I don't want to send something out that's supportive of this article, well, that's a whole different discussion.
right. I just think that it doesn't speak for the full planning board. It speaks for part of the planning board, and it leaves out, you know, it leaves out a lot of the discussion. And if the whole goal is to go to town meeting floor and have a debate, then maybe we should have the majority view and the minority view. I mean, otherwise we could try to hammer out consensus, but I know how hard that's gone. I know where, you know, if we tried to do that in an hour, I know we wouldn't get to it, but
But the consensus would be what? I mean, the article already doesn't have what you want in it. So it's
yeah,
already.
okay. So let's dive in and try. So I like at the bottom of page 1, has low impact on the environment and the neighborhood. No development of open space. I would change no to low development of open space. You know, it says no new infrastructure needed. I mean, that's an assumption. I don't know that that's definitive. You could say low new infrastructure needed, but I don't know that you can say no new infrastructure needed. Under provides less expensive housing.
Maybe you could say likely not, because you've already got, I mean, I think it's more likely than not, but.
You've already got a sewer, right? Yeah.
So you could say likely no new. I think saying
say
low
likely.
instead of no new development is fine. Saying likely no new infrastructure, I think is fine.
I think that's making assumptions.
Well, because you already, it's not building like over at Walcott Woods, they had to bring in all new infrastructure. When you have your own home, you already have water and sewer and electricity and telephone and data and everything already there. So, you know, you're not going to need a new tap from the street. You're not going to need a new line to tear up the street. You just, the whole idea on the ADU is that you build off of what you've got.
But I think it's a short term, I think that's a short term view. This is a long-term article. And I think we don't know. It's unknown. And I think to make an assumption, I think that's,
And we don't know also, we don't know if there's a discussion to take the cap of 10 off. I mean, that's
There
been
is not. And that is just, that's just wrong.
There has been discussion at 3 times during.
But that's not before, that's not in the article that we are presenting. The article that we are presenting has a cap. If other people on the floor of town meeting want to make an amendment to that, that's their choice. That's why we have a town meeting. But we're not making that change.
Well, but you have talked about making that change.
We are not making that change.
Okay.
All we're talking about
Right.
is
Well-
this town meeting and this article.
Correct. All right, I think we should try to definitely move this along. So can we just like scroll up to the top? Cheryl, do you mind?
Tim has it.
Or Tim, sorry.
Mhm.
So the need, I think this is great information, but I actually think this is probably very antiquated and old data. I'm concerned about putting facts out there based on I know you quote the Milton Housing Production Plan 2020. I can tell you, being in real estate, we are seeing, especially during the pandemic, droves of young families moving to Milton, coming from the city. I think these numbers are, I think we could actually probably go to the school committee and get a more updated version. To say average households sizes are shrinking, I think there's
There's a
an
lot of,
argument.
yeah,
There's
there's a
why
lot.
we need new schools because we're overflowing with the number of people and the children and the projections of people moving to Milton. So that's a fact. And I think this data does not reflect.
Well,
what is up to date.
having worked on the housing production plan, the data was as current as 2019. And,
That was 3 years
and the
ago.
reason- Yeah, but the fact is, and you can look at the census data that came out from 2020. I don't think that the percentage of households of single person and age have changed. In fact, it might have,
It's increased, the new data, and the average household, the average age of the person, the resident in Milton is now 38.5, just under age 39. That's our,
What?
where does that data point come
That is-
from?
that's from the census data. That's the average age of the person resident in Milton. It's increased 26%, under 18 and under has increased 26% since the last census. So it's all there. So my point is, you're using data that could be questioned at town meeting, I think.
All right, so my point including the data is that when we're working on policy, it's not being drawn out of the air. The
Mhm.
policy is being built upon the plans that have been adopted. So the master plan was adopted, the housing production plan was adopted by this board. And it's our responsibility to make our zoning consistent with we've said we're going to do in those plans. And so if we say that the plans are always no good because the data is changing on a monthly or weekly basis, then we're stymied and we can't make policy changes. So
Well, I just think we
that's
just
my
shouldn't-
concern.
I just think we shouldn't refer to this because it's already outdated. Because
We
it
don't
says
know,
20% of
I-
all households are single person households with projections growing to 26%.
Well,
That's-
our housing production
didn't-
plan is updated on 5-year cycles thus far. And if we're not going to count on that for what we're trying to do in terms of policy, why did we do the plan?
Well,
Remember.
we
the
had
housing
a
production-
pandemic. We had a pandemic and a crazy housing situation in the last 2 years. It was very unique and different. Nobody expected it. There was no reason they would have projected that, but
And
So
there's very few
I
homes
think
for
you can make
sale.
I think you can make a summary, Cheryl, of saying what the goal, which it's sort of redundant, and maybe this is a section you can take out, because I think what the need is sort of addressed in what the goals are, which you have at the top. The first paragraph states what our goals are and what the needs based on meeting these needs. So it might be redundant that, we're saying, obviously we want to take care of, an aging population.
yeah, the second bullet of most residents age 65 and over want to stay in their community as they age, but most homes are not designed for aging in place. I think that's fair. That's fact. I wouldn't disagree with that. But the other, I don't know if it's,
Well, this is from the housing production plan. This isn't stuff
Right.
that I made up or I
Right,
looked
no,
up.
I understand that.
And I'm just trying to we're taking the housing production plan, trying to move it forward. And people may say that, and you may be right, the data may be changing, but we have to have our sort of grounded starting point, I guess is my point. And while, and if we want to take out, I mean, we know that young people can't afford to stay here. We know what the prices are. We know that real estate taxes are going up. And we also know from national data that household incomes are stagnating. So
See,
we're
I
only
think
talking
that
about,
I don't think we have that current information. I think that I'm just telling you, I'm seeing the buyers in the community who are coming in. I think Milton, you know, has changed significantly since this was drafted.
we also know a lot of people have said that they wouldn't be able to buy their houses today if they were looking to buy in Milton.
I think
And, you know, that
75% of the people in town would be saying that.
And that reflects the fact that the cost of housing is far outpaced the cost of, or the, wages. Wages aren't increasing at the level that housing costs are, and except maybe for people who sell real estate. But and no, nothing against you, Meredith, but the cost of housing was a percentage basis for the compensation. Obviously, that those folks are going to have an increase. But if there's a particular, I mean, it's not meant to be debated on a point by point basis. It's supposed to give a snapshot of what the housing production plan said.
Correct.
And so, whether one or two of these points might be superseded by current data a year or two out, I don't know that that's really the focus of what we're trying to do, right? We're
well, as
focused
we're speaking, there's a presentation, a Zoom, presentation on the overflow of the schools. And I just think town meeting members are smart. They're seeing, they're looking at all the issues. This could be an issue, because I think a lot of this data would be questioned. So I'm just saying, if we, either reduce this, made it more of a general, but I think that's sort of what
if we're not gonna get this all out tonight, we're not gonna get it out before town meeting. So this wants to get decided tonight, because the town meetings is coming up. We don't even have, people aren't even gonna get it. We'll be lucky if they get it before town meeting, get a chance to read it. And I'm raising my voice about this because I know what it takes. I've been doing this a long time on the planning board with the Warrant Committee before that. And, we should, it's unfortunate, but, we don't have time to kind of, go through multiple versions, I'm afraid. So,
okay, so that was just one comment.
I mean, I think the bullet that I think that 20% of all households are single person households, with projections of that growing to 26% by 2030. Oh, I don't know why we have an echo. Hold on. Sorry about that. My cat walked over my keyboard. Set the whole thing off. Is everything okay? Oh my gosh. Okay. But I think that bullet, the 20% one, growing to 26% by 2030, I think that's what's changed. I think that's the one that would have to come out. And
I'm fine with taking that one bullet out. I think that we can get that, but having to rewrite the whole thing, I just don't see it happening where everyone can agree with it. So.
And then, I mean, the other, the other bullet that I don't know, I think the population is aging, with over 20% of Milton's population over 65. I don't know if that's the case anymore, because we did have.
I just looked on the census and it's 17.9 as of 2019.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking at 2021 and it's right around there too.
yeah.
Well, 17%, 18?
Yeah, say 18, round it up.
All right, we'll go 18%. All right, and
what was it, Rich, in 2021? What did you say?
Sorry, I just got off of it. Hold on.
Okay.
I just saw it. It's
that sounded about-
17.9.
Yeah, that sounded about right.
So then the projections would also change by.
Okay, so I would just change that 20% to 18.
Yeah.
And I would take out with projections that grow to 26%, because I
Yeah, take that bullet out.
I think that's.
wait, are we talking about the aging population or the single person household bullet?
Oh, I thought we took out the 20% of all households are single person households, with projections growing to 26%. I thought we took that one out.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. So
But
then
the
it's
17 is the age of population, 17.
18, yeah, so rounded up 18.
17.9 is so 18. All right.
Okay, that at least seems a little more.
Okay.
And average households sizes are shrinking. I think that should be taken out.
It's true.
Based on
what?
what?
It's, I just saw it on MAPC did it, I think. So, but that's fine. I can take it out. It doesn't really get,
The schools
Yeah,
don't think so.
Yeah, the schools don't think so.
And I know, I mean.
I mean, other towns aren't having school populations over the roof like we are. So I think this is, I mean, I don't doubt that average household sizes are shrinking broadly, but in Milton, we're going to have a school crisis.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
don't think those changes are substantive.
No.
And change the need. I mean, the needs, I mean, I
Right.
heard these comments earlier about housing stock and, you know, those are all there and you've got one bullet there. It looks like that talks about that. That's important.
yeah.
So we're, just to be clear, so the first bullet point, changing 20% to 18%. We'll strike the third and fourth bullet points.
Yep.
Then down to what Denny said earlier, under the impact on the environment and neighborhood, change no development of open space to low.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reality is the ones that are within the existing house wouldn't change it at all, but in any case. I would like to say likely no new infrastructure needed rather than strike it. So,
Yep. No, I think that was kind of one of the points we made about the fact that these are more efficient uses of housing stock and that you're not having to rip up, putting in, you know, all new utilities like all the subdivisions that we've approved. And so I think that's an important point to make.
I mean, while Wolcott Woods, it's all greened up now, when they put in their subsurface stormwater systems, it was huge earth movement construction.
Under provide less expensive housing choices.
Mhm.
The second bullet, I think is making an assumption, provides options for low and moderate income residents. I think unless there's a cap on that, there's no control over what the
All right,
price.
how about the
Yeah, but-
potential to provide?
So, yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, Cheryl. I'd like to hear what you want to change it to, but we got to be careful about that because the reality is while there might not be a cap and while there could be anomalies, it does provide opportunity. I mean, the reality is I've heard folks say, well, you know, if you're renting out $3,000, that's a mortgage. While that's seemingly true, to get a mortgage, you have to have 20% down. You have to have stellar credit. You have to have all these things that a lot of people, that quite honestly, that's the problem. People can't afford or don't have the means to do that. And so to get an apartment for $3,000, even if it's the same as a mortgage, it's still easier to attain. And that's true.
But that's not low and moderate income necessarily.
It provides an opportunity.
It provides, yeah.
Okay, but so we don't know if market rate may provide low and moderate, but
Correct.
we don't know. We don't know if it will be
can't
low and
know.
moderate because
Yeah,
market rate, the market decides. We don't
You
have a
can't
say on
guarantee
that.
anything, Denny. You
That's
can't
why
guarantee anything. You can just provide the opportunity.
So just so I can chime in real quick here, there are currently 5 rental listings in town of Milton today. None of them below $2,500 and none of them for a unit that has fewer than 3 bedrooms and 1,200 square feet. So the ADU bylaw would not produce units of nearly that size or nearly that bedroom count. So, you know, you can't predict what someone's going to charge for an apartment in their basement. But I think it's a very safe assumption that it'll be below $2,500, which is the going rate for a 3-bedroom rental in town of Milton, today, March 3rd, 2022.
Or at the very least, you could say that you're providing the opportunity. I mean, we can't guarantee anything, right? But by not doing it, you're not providing any opportunity.
So you could say an opportunity, but it's not necessarily.
Well, it says provides options.
Options.
It provides options. That's what the
We
language
don't,
says.
I mean,
I don't think there is any ADU that you could provide a ruling on that would mandate that there is
I mean, I
something
think
there. This is an option.
if you
It's an
build a
option.
brand new, if you build a brand new ADU and somebody's, spends whatever, $400,000 building an ADU, they're not gonna charge $1,500 for rent. They're gonna charge whatever the market will allow, but we don't know. I mean, maybe I wasn't thinking of the basement like Tim. I mean, I don't know which way.
But Denny, the language just says.
Hey, can you
provides
lower your voice,
options.
Kathleen, please?
Sorry,
Please.
It doesn't promise anything. It just says provides options.
Okay.
Well, we could
provides
say provides options.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I was thinking if you wanted, I get the point that it might not actually be an option for low income folks, but it might be, we don't know. So I think options is better than opportunities in terms of words choice. And
That's what you have, right?
You could say possible options for low and moderate, because we're not capping, so we can't promise that.
You're not writing, I'm promising, you're writing provides options. You're not, it does not state
You could
provides
say possible
a
options.
guarantee. Even
Right.
if you're going in a
Okay.
direction that it's not in, it doesn't, right now, it doesn't say provides guarantee or provides, they will be there. So you're not saying either, you're just saying it's an option. And that's what this is, it's why we're doing this.
All right, what's the suggested language, Cheryl?
well, I was just thinking that we could say something like the potential.
How about switching provides to presents? So presents options.
I just think it's gonna be questioned on town.
I'm sure everything's gonna be questioned on
Yeah.
town meeting floor, so really, I don't see.
But the problem is, if somebody
It's gonna make a
questions,
lot of difference.
These are the standard, if you look at on one of the ADU, the model bylaw at the state and so many of the other communities, these are standard benefits that are cited. So it's not like when I put this together, I was breaking new ground and, sort of coming up with everything on my own. I looked at a lot of sources. So, in terms of whether people at town meeting, want to debate every one of these potential benefits, and if that benefit doesn't turn out to be, well, maybe some of the other benefits do turn out to be, so if we can't really guarantee, but we're trying to set a framework,
Yeah.
So, I think providing options is what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide options for people to who can live there, would have to spend less than if they were trying to buy a house for $1.5 million. I mean, that's what we're trying to do with it. That's what we see as a benefit of it. If we don't realize it, then we're not meeting one of the benefits that we're seeking to meet. But we're not guaranteeing that any of these things are going to come to fruition either.
Well, I think we have to make that clear at town meeting, because I think one of the speakers previously said that we don't want to mislead people, and they're going to say, wait, I thought these were going to be affordable for low and moderate income, and it ends up being these expensive units, and they're going to say, wait, I thought this was affordable. And we want to make sure it's not confusing and people say, wait, I thought I was voting for something and it's actually not what I was voting for.
So just.
Well, the only way to, I'm sorry, Rich, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your thought. I just
gonna
wanted to try to
say,
have
the only, we've always said that affordability, the only way you're guaranteed, and I would even say that capital A affordability isn't affordable at 80% AMI for a lot of people.
Yeah.
To make it affordable to some people at 30% AMI, we don't have any, I don't know if we have any, I'm not sure. I shouldn't say that we don't, but I doubt we have very many units at 30% AMI in Milton. Every one of the 40Bs is only proposing 80% AMI. And I don't know if what they have at Winter Valley, which is affordable, and they may have some down to 30% AMI. But what's affordable to one person is different than what's affordable to another, right? And so that's, to say that we're going to, and what's low income and moderate income, we're not defining it. So, I think generally people have an idea of what some of those things are, right? But many places like Cape Cod, one of the reasons, sorry, Rich, one last thing I'll say about this, Cape Cod, one of the reasons they even have incentives. They have grants available for people to design their ADUs because they don't have places for the people to work, the people who work there, that their economy relies on. A lot of it's the service industry, hospitality industry. They can't afford to live on the Cape. So the people who go to the Cape can afford the homes, the expensive homes at the Cape, would like to go to the restaurants and the shops and the coffee shops, etc. But the people who work in those places don't have anywhere to live. And that's why the Cape is really focused on the ADUs in part. I'm sure they're working on other things too, but in reading through their information, that was some of what was driving them. And they're seeing that that is a potential to provide it, but not guaranteeing it either. So sorry.
They're also a seasonal, they're I think very different. The Cape, it's hard to compare Milton to the Cape. Those are very seasonal, typically seasonal properties. But during COVID, what's happened is people are working remotely and they are staying year round, where they used to move out, somebody else would move in, they would rent their house out. And there was a shift in seasonal employment, and now residents are staying and living down on the Cape year round, when it was, typically maybe their second home. They're choosing to stay down there. You're seeing a lot of full-time people down there.
That's been
Yeah,
changing
just-
down there for years. So the area median, 80%
sorry.
area median income in Milton right now is $70,000 a year.
So I'm sorry, we lost track of something. Rich, did you want to say something after Cheryl? I know you were waiting.
No, yeah, I take issue with us kind of harping on this one provides options for low and moderate incomes, because I've definitely heard a lot of folks call in our meetings and say that it's confusing and it's not for low income, or, but I feel like that's just twisting the words, right? So if you go in look at California, they just made ADUs across the entire state. And I'm literally staring at it, if you go on their website, it talks about why they did it. And it talks about providing means for low income, or, use whatever words they used. But that's the point of this, right? This is not designed to create I guess you call it big A, affordable housing. That's not what this is. We're not creating, a lottery system, etc. This is just another means to create some diverse housing stock. So if we're drilling down to mince words about moderate income and low income, the reality is this does provide access to people that do not have to go and buy, a 3-family, 1-bedroom home that I'm seeing go for $900,000 now, that 10 years ago was $500,000. And so I'm not in real estate, but I can see it. I see it in my area. And that is not okay, good. That's a problem, right? So California just went statewide ADUs. I think Tim was talking, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tim, but he was talking about Massachusetts looking at similar laws. 40B is a law because cities and towns, wouldn't create opportunities. And so I'm sorry, but Massachusetts is probably going to get an ADU law that just trumps all of this at some point in our future. If cities and towns can't start finding ways to adopt it to get some affordable housing or some diverse housing stock. we're not, I mean, again, I take issue with some of these comments because we're not turning Milton into a rental property. Everything's gonna be rental properties. That's just crazy. Look around the state. You've got really wealthy towns in Massachusetts that have put way less restrictions than ours, and that our planning department has already done the research, and they're looking at 3, 4, 5 units a year. I mean, it's not Armageddon. I mean, I'm having a problem with some of the worries here, because this is like, I'm a data person and the data's there. Like, we're seeing this all over the country. Milton is not so unique that other, like, we would be so different than every other town out there. I don't understand it.
Well, I think,
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Meredith.
no, I think that's an interesting point that I think we'll get to later, because I think there are more restrictions that weren't talked about on this, but we're not there yet. So we'll talk about the other towns that have passed this later, so.
Yeah, I did take some notes on the bottom of page 2. But
All right, so it sounds like,
Sorry.
Just on that one point on the provides options for low and moderate income residents. I don't think, Rich, does it sound like you don't want to change that, right?
I mean, I'm not sure what we're worried about. It's options. Options, I guess I can go look it up in the dictionary. It's not a guarantee. If anybody is going to question the word options on town floor, I think they're fighting something different than what this sentence says. That's my point. I think they have a different.
That's kind of where I started, is that it's very hard for us to come to consensus on this, because I think the way that I'm understanding market rate is the market is going to determine what rents get charged in Milton. And I think that I feel it might be misleading to say that we're providing those options when we don't know if we're providing those. I think you guys believe you are providing those. I don't doubt that, but I don't know. I just don't, I don't know how many we are, because I think the market rate, I think they're gonna be up there. I think they're gonna be 3,000, depending on how this works. And I don't know how it's gonna work. But I think we're still on page 1. We've been working on this for half an hour. I want to keep going, but I also just want to accept, maybe it is better if we just have the majority do a 2-page and let the minority do a 1-page and just let it go. You know what I mean? Like, so that, I mean, you've said you want to debate this on town meeting floor. Maybe we just put the two, the two approaches out there and just let it go.
I have a procedural question, actually. Sorry, Rich.
No,
when a board takes a vote and there's passage of the vote, I don't think that there's a way for there to be 2 things that go forward from that board. I would be surprised if Mr. Asher on the warrant committee would let a minority warrant committee report go out from the warrant committee. So
I think government bodies do this all the time. Government bodies do this all the time. Government bodies do this all the time. There's a majority and a minority opinion. And I mean, you say you want it debated on town meeting floor, so I don't know why we wouldn't put.
That's debating by the town meeting members. The board goes forward with what the board has voted. And town meeting members can debate it. I just don't think that it's, and it gets to the point now, I have my other question is that when we go up to town meeting and we present this article, who's doing it? I mean, is it you as the chair that's going to be presenting this article for vote by town meeting? And,
well, I welcome that discussion, and I would welcome you as the author if you wanted to, or I would let the 3 of you decide. And I will probably at some point comment or answer questions if they're asked of me on the process. But I'm flexible on that. I didn't know if you had any proposal or suggestion.
Well, I mean, it seems to me that quite clearly your heart isn't in it.
So, well, I just want to be clear. Kathleen, I actually did really want this ADU article to be as wonderful as I think it could be. and my heart has been in this. I put it on the agenda over 20 some odd times as chair. I really did want this to work, and I appreciate that you're laughing, and I want to laugh with you. But this has been a really hard process all the way around for everyone. And I know it's been hard for you, but it's also been hard for all of us. So,
The
but
messy part of democracy is that we don't always come to consensus. But we have to respect that there's a majority, and I respect that you have different views. And, you know, the problem that we have in many parts of the country today, I feel, is that when people disagree, they demonize one another. And I think that's a big mistake. So, you know, I think what we've tried to work through as many things to find, you know, common ground on, and we just didn't find them on everything, right? So you two felt as if you didn't find them enough, and you wanted to vote a different way than the three of us. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, you know, and I don't think it should be considered a problem at town meeting, because, you know, everybody should, I mean, we're 5 people, as we've said before, and we've listened to probably 20 people, but there's a lot more people that live here. There's a lot more town meeting members. And it may be that, you know, as Tim and Rich have said, it may be that this is something that is going to become out of our control at some point, coming from the state. But, you know, I think what we're trying to do is provide information that helps people make a decision, or at least helps them think about the questions that they want to have or that they want to ask. My worry is that there's information out there that's just inaccurate. And I don't want that information to be the information that people are using to make decisions at town meeting, or to reach out to their town meeting members and say, vote against something because they have the wrong information. All right, so at least, you know, so I'd rather take a couple of things out of here and get the thing out to people than, because I think the factual information about it and the reasons behind doing it, there's enough of them that, you know, that should stand and that it should go. So that's I'm sorry.
All right, so moving forward, has a low impact on the environment and neighborhood. This is another assumption that I just.
yeah, so she's changed that to no, yeah.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, because I know no development of open space, which is not true. So we're changing that.
Yeah, and then
No new infrastructure, but then more compact infill development promotes more walkable car light neighborhoods. So if 4 Curry College students move in and they need to drive to get to school and they don't live near the school, I guess
my problem is to assume we
understand.
know who some of the people are going to be. And I've heard too many times people say Curry College students now. And I don't know why we have such a big fear of Curry College. Our goal has never been here to say we want to house the Curry College students. And so, you know, I want to be careful about that, because I think it's something that it's not been borne out in any of the other ADUs that have been done. And, you know, I don't know. So
there's quite a few that rent in Milton, and if you're aware of the situations where people have rented, it's been an issue, but it's not necessarily, there's always renters, issues.
They'll rent. So just to throw, Cheryl, and I don't know if this is what the section was intended for, but when I read the heading there, I think of, you know, go back to the conversations we've had about, we've got what, 10 40Bs in front of us. There's going to be more, I'm sure. It seems to me that because we have not put in the past 30 or 40 years some laws like this in place, all we got in front of us to take care of the 40B or our affordable housing is by putting massive structures, 6, 7 floors, 100+ units into areas that I will debate anybody that wants to, that are just not the appropriate areas for them. Any single 40B that we're looking at right now started off coming in just way outrageously too big. And I know everyone on this board is probably living near one that's possibly coming to their neighborhood. The idea here is that if we did stuff like this 30 or 40 years ago, and not just an ADU law, but created additional laws that allowed for these things to be spread across the town, maybe then one neighborhood or two neighborhoods wouldn't be looking at multiple 100+ story units, apartment complexes. And so that's what I was thinking about here. It's providing, no large new construction projects. That's what I'm thinking of when you're saying these things. And if that's what you're thinking, I don't know, maybe if folks have issue with the words that you've used, maybe we get very specific. I don't know.
Yeah, the reason for the words, again, some of it is other languages been used elsewhere, but the idea is you're going to add units. It's kind of like the same idea that Tim did when he presented about the MBTA communities. If you're going to add increase the range of your housing stock, which we've all said is a goal, the variety in our housing stock. Well, what are the ways you can do it, right? You can do it by building big apartment or condo complexes like the 40Bs, and those are concentrated in a few spots. Or you can sort of spread units out throughout the town so that the impact is lessened in any one place, right? So, that's the idea of the compact infill is that's what you're doing. You're kind of doing smaller things and you're kind of filling it in places that make sense. Not every property is going to make sense to do this on it. We haven't really talked about that, but.
And I think that's a little bit of the misinformation on what's just being said, is that people think by doing this, it's going to stop the 40Bs, and it's not. So what you end up with is you have the 40Bs and you have higher density. So
yeah, the problem,
this does not, and I think we as a board need to make it really clear that this is not going to stop 40B projects. It's actually going to make it.
And even like 40B projects, they're not going to stop that transit project. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're looking at 500 new 40B units in the next 5 to 10 years, and we're finally getting to our 10%, but now they want us to come up with 25% in units near transit. And if you do ADUs, that's not going to change it. If you do condo bylaws, that's not going to change it. They're still going to want things. You know what I mean? Like, I wish it did make a difference, but I mean, it's like, I don't know that it will, and I don't, but
you don't know. But see, there's the problem, I think, like, because my thinking is we should have done this a long time ago. We should start doing it now. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing is it's too late. Why do it? And
no,
so,
that's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay.
I agree with you. I wish we had done more affordable housing along the years as we went. But I also know that, like, almost every town is dealing with 40Bs. We're not like, it's everybody avoided it. It wasn't like, you know what I mean? It's not like if Milton had, I mean, I get what you're saying, Rich. I understand where you're coming from, but I'm
trying to think for the future though, right? So not to cut you off, but what about this? So right now we have 10%. That's what our number is. And I'm new to the 40B world since being on the warrant committee and now here, right? And so now I understand. I've been listening, I'm hearing about it. But something tells me that if we should have done this 30 years ago, maybe we wouldn't be in this place today, or not just, obviously not talking about ADU, if we just had a better plan 30 years ago. The problem is now here we are today, and in 15, 20 years from now, will that number still be 10%? Something tells me no, because we're not getting out of, like, you're not hearing, oh my God, this town just got 200 unit condos. They're good forever. No, something tells me that 10% is going to change in the future. And we're going to keep having to restructure and replan and rethink how we're doing affordable and changing, housing stock. And so if we can't get small incremental changes today, well, this, to me, that's why I go back to the California statement. That's why states make changes, because they take it out of the city and town's hands and say, you know what, you're not making the change anyway. We're going to make it for you. And so,
and that's, again, I think would be great to do an affordable ADU article, which Kathleen is working on in Lincoln.
Great. Yeah, let's talk about that next.
But we can't get this one through. How are we going to get an affordable one through?
Right.
So my thing is,
I think there might have been more buy-in for an affordable one, because I mean, but but
No,
Um,
I don't think so, because you would have had people being told that you have to rent to these specific people to have it be an affordable
Well, it's the
unit.
same comments that we're gonna change neighborhoods and
Well-
believe me, I'm sympathetic to that. I don't want my neighborhood to change either. But you have to have some level of understanding that, you know, over the next 15, 20 years, things are gonna change. Now let's make them moderate or make them something that we can live with, right? Let's set ourselves up for success and not just punt it for another 20 years. So here's my issue with this, what we're doing. I want to go through this. I'll go through longer and we can edit some words. But the reality is, like, and I was quiet at the beginning about it because I do want to make sure we're all happy about what we're doing here. But like, one of the other things we have to remember, like, if the next thing we vote on is a 4-1 and I'm the one outlier, I mean, I'm definitely not going to raise my hand and say, I want you all to allow me to write like something drastically against, you know what I mean? And then you have to be okay with me submitting that. I mean, I've never done that on the warrant committee. I've never done that on the planning board, because usually it's, we vote, majority goes forward, and then usually just, yeah, whoever the majority was starts writing it and helping it through. And I've been doing that thus far. I haven't like said, hey, I was against and you must change everything.
yeah, I know, but we did say we wanted to debate this. So if we want to
Well,
debate.
I'm not debating this on town floor. I won't do that. I want town meeting members to do that. That's not, I feel like my job ended at town meeting. And if they have questions for me, I would absolutely stand up and answer those. But it's not my job to now debate against 400 plus or whatever members of town meeting. I feel like we've done our due diligence. We're laying out why we've done it. And this letter is laying out why the people that voted for it have done it. And we can, I'm not meaning this meanly, but folks can chime in from the public and say, hey, it's not for low income. Well, I didn't say it was. It said, I'm saying that it's providing an opportunity, just like literally every other state that's putting this forward is saying. I mean, because they've been doing it and they're seeing numbers. We're not making stuff up. This is stuff that has data. And so, again, we're not talking in absolutes. And so my hope is that we can at least say, here's why we did it.
Okay, well, I just want to get to a place where I can at least agree on the facts. So let's, I mean, I'm willing to continue if people want to go to page 2.
Okay. I hope some of the top things are not challenged as facts, because I think there are facts, but
Yeah. I would just add under neighborhood notice and input, I would just add a clarifying statement in between the two sentences. So it says, so the first sentence says, under current zoning, any homeowner can build a house in addition, a garage or other structures without notifying neighbors unless a variance is needed. I would say something like, with this bylaw, if you construct an ADU within your home's footprint, you do not need a special permit or to notify neighbors. And then I would continue on. That's just clarifying so people understand that. Right.
you don't think under the first one, permitting where it says units within an existing house are allowed as of right? You think, I could put and without. You want
I
me
would
to-
just, but it's up to you, but I would just add that because it's just clarifying, because you have neighbor notice and input. I would just add that.
Can you repeat it?
Yes, with this bylaw, if you construct an ADU within your home's footprint, you do not need a special permit or to notify neighbors.
I don't think the grammar is so great on that, but yeah,
Can you
I can
read
see
that
the
again?
idea.
I'm trying to write down, with this bylaw, if you construct an ADU within your home's footprint, you do not need a special permit.
Or to notify neighbors.
Special permit. But to notify, well, I mean, that's kind of already, you don't need a special permit is already covered under the permitting.
But you're talking about neighbor notice. It's
Why
under
don't you
the
just
neighbor
leave
notice
out
thing.
the special permit and just say you don't have to notify the neighbors?
You do not need to notify the neighbors, because then it's not repetitive with permitting.
Okay,
Right.
okay, okay.
It was just a grammar change, Jenny, not a substantive change.
That's right. And then this bylaw requires a special permit process with notice to neighbors for units requiring an addition or for that. So that, okay. I just wanted to, I felt that was left out. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay,
And then,
you said there were other restrictions that were missing here?
Under occupancy, I would just add the owner must live on the property. I would add for a minimum of 6 months, because this sounds like if I was reading this and didn't know, I would assume that the homeowner had to live there full time.
Okay,
But why does it say they can be away for, it says not less than 6 months?
No, that's the
renter.
rented, the
that's the
renter,
renter.
The homeowner has to live there
Yeah.
forever, right?
at least
Right.
6 months.
6 months.
But this
6
is,
months.
the 6 months talks about the,
The leaser is 6 months in the way it
Yes.
was written. She's adding the owner.
the
at
tenant,
6
the
months.
tenant, so landlord and tenant, so.
They both have to, so the tenant has to have 6 months or greater, and the
The homeowner
The
must live on the
owner-
property a minimum of 6 months. So I think that's important to add,
That's fine.
that they're not full-time residents.
I mean, we're talking about assumptions a lot, and I mean, do we assume that most of the, it seems like a pretty, I don't know, like, do we think that a significant number of owner occupants are actually going to be part-time owner occupants? I think that's, I don't know, I
But
wouldn't,
it's allowed in the bylaw, so I think you have to be,
What is a lot, what's considered,
It has
Just
to
try-
be your
we're trying to
principal resident.
describe- We're
So
trying to
what's
describe
principles?
the bylaw. We're trying to describe what's in the bylaw, and the bylaw says you have to live there for 6 months, or, I mean, you have to live there 6
No.
months, right?
Yeah, I was just trying to keep it really simple so as not to be confusing, but the owner, most people were, like, if you're thinking about it, did they want, does the owner have to live there? You know, yeah, the owner has to live there. And can you rent this out to somebody for like a short period, like a week or a month? No, it has to be 6 months. No, like, these are the big answers. Then you can get into the nuanced answers of more detail, which then starts to make it more confusing. You know, that's,
yeah, so is there like what is the law on what is considered permanent residence? Is there a time on that, or is there a?
it's our
What is-
articles. Our article says a minimum of 6 months.
That's what it says, okay.
yeah, because I think it's just to address the fact that some people live elsewhere for part of the year.
Mhm.
And that's, that doesn't take away from the fact that it's their principal residence for tax reasons, is one thing, but that's not what this is defined by.
But this is talking about occupancy, the
Right.
the homeowner and the tenant. And I think it's really important to say that this, if I was reading it, would lead me to believe the owner must live on the property full
Yeah,
time.
the way that I read it, it said, I read it as the homeowner must be there full time, but the article says 6 months. So
Yeah,
I think it,
It's
Yeah,
really
it's just-
silent on the time, but
The only confusing part then is, I mean, I don't want anybody to get the impression that an owner can live there 7 months and then rent it out to somebody else for the next few months and then move back, because that's not what this says either. I mean. you
well,
know,
the
owner-
lease periods are not less than 6 months. The lease
but it-
periods for the
he's
talking
renter.
about
the owner.
The owner doesn't, yeah, he's not leasing, he's living there. If he lives there for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, or he can't go less than 6, but anything over 6, and if it's, let's say it's 7 months, it doesn't mean he can go rent it out to somebody else. If he's the only owner, he is the only occupant there. If he actually lives in Florida for several months of the year, I guess my question is, what does it matter? Because it's not like somebody's moving in his place.
Well, I think it
That's actually a
says
good
that,
question, Rich, because you technically could rent out your house. I don't think we have do we have anything in the bylaw that says you cannot rent out your primary residence if you have someone renting in for ADU?
Why would you, how can you treat these people, how can you treat this owner any different than anybody else in town? I mean, people rent their houses out for short periods of time now.
Exactly, so that you could have.
We
two
don't have any provision. We don't have any prohibition against
No,
that.
that's fine, Kathleen. I just didn't know. I mean, I was just
Yeah,
asking. a
no, we
question. I don't know.
Because we
I
had
mean,
that question
I-
came up. That question came up about the Airbnb thing, and there are Airbnbs all over town. I looked them up when we had this
Yes, I know
question the
that. You
last
can see it
time.
right now, yeah. They're
And
there.
so, yeah.
So back to
Um,
occupancy, I just think it's important to describe the occupancy requirements of the homeowner as well as the ADU resident.
So maybe the clearer way to do it is to say, have the end of the second sentence be ending after family member, and then a non-family member rather, and then just put the durations of the two separately,
Yeah,
Mhm.
Fine.
okay? And then, so that way you're not confusing it, right?
Right.
right.
The main point you want to make is that what you're allowed to do, and then the next one can just be more detail.
Which
Okay.
addresses the issue that everybody seems to think that some developer is gonna come in and buy the house and rent out the whole thing and all that sort of stuff.
Could you also break it up or like under occupancy or, I
We
mean, you're
can make
talking
it two
about,
separate, yeah.
yeah, because you're
Make the
talking about
ownership
occupancy
one
of
thing and
both.
the rental
Yeah.
another. Yeah,
Yes.
that's fine. Okay, so,
Because you break, yeah, it might
ownership
be a little
one.
easier.
and rental second, that's fine. You'll trust me with coming up with language?
Yeah, because it might make it clearer that than if you talk about the
That's
6
fine.
months
Yep,
underneath.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay, cool.
So I just want to understand something. Under the other restrictions, it says design must keep the appearance of a single family residence. I just wanted to understand, is it supposed to look like the single family house? You know, if you have a granny flat, is it supposed to look like the house that the primary house, or could it look like a separate house entire, like a totally different house? Because that could be anything. Do you know what I mean? I'm just trying to understand, because if I have that question, I imagine a citizen might have that question, or a town meeting member might have that question. So design must keep the appearance of a single family residence. So,
The idea is that it's not supposed to look like two individual units to look like a two family. And that has to do with the primary entrance of the house still being the primary entrance. It's not like given two equal status, you know? So that's just in the language of the article, right, Kathleen?
Yep.
okay. All right.
So it's not gonna look like a duplex. It's not gonna look
Yeah.
like, you know, a row of townhouses. It's not gonna.
That's what that's for. Okay. I wouldn't have assumed that, but now that you explained it. The bullet above it, ADU is terminated on sale unless new owner signs an affidavit of owner occupancy and files it with the building commissioner. So is that the case with the as of right and the special permit? Is that the
Yes.
same process for both? I just want, that's the case? So the ADU ends unless the new owner goes and signs up again?
Yep.
For both, even the as of right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. All right, on the bottom of page 2, I'm struggling with the last 3 bullets as examples to show that the towns with similar requirements don't see high unit counts. Because I think the second bullet says average number of ADUs approved annually in Greater Boston municipalities is 2.5 units.
Yeah, so that was the 2018 data that is provided in that report. And then,
The other 3 towns, I looked into these, Lexington, Newton, Arlington. They have set limits that our ADU article is not. So in other words, our planning board article applies to all single family houses in town. And then we have a cap of 10. And that's why we did a cap of 10. But these other towns have limits beyond the cap of 10 that keep the construction of ADUs down. For instance, in Lexington, they don't allow ADUs in the vast majority of town. They don't allow it in their single-family housing zones. Lexington only allows ADUs in 2 zones, the local office area and the central business zone. So the vast majority of town does not have.
Are you sure that's not what was revised?
I looked at the most recent thing I could find. Okay, so it says,
They
allows ADUs by
revised,
right in 5 years. I looked at the most recent, I noticed the 5 years ago, yeah, no, this
Yeah,
is.
but those towns have more commercial and more varied districts than we do. So we should probably just take that out because I think it's confusing and I probably think that, you know, Milton's zoning adopted in 1926 or something like that, stopped allowing 2 families except for ones that were already built. So we have a pretty strict bylaw on 2 families throughout the state, and we outlaw 3s outright. We've done that since like 1913. So I think that it's probably not right to sort of put in other towns because I said Lexington, I know from doing work there, and in Arlington, those have more commercial, more mixed use districts than we do. This town is pretty much single family all the way and all the way through it. They don't have the same, we don't have the same diversity of zoning that those other places do. So it's
But the
probably not a
problem
good
is-
idea. Good
problem
idea
is
to put that
people
in.
want to know what other towns are
Yeah.
doing. And so, you know, if you don't give them any examples that they can look up, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not it's not meant to be exactly what we're doing.
right.
It's meant to be, what are other towns doing? The
Yeah.
question that Rich asked a while ago, and I think other people are interested in, you know, it's not meant to be, that we would be exactly the same as any one of these. We wouldn't be, obviously, you know. it just-
Let's look at Arlington. In Arlington, an accessory dwelling unit may be built in a single family dwelling in the RO or R1 districts, provided that all of the following conditions are met. No additional off-street parking spaces are needed. The lot area shall be at least the minimum required. The accessory dwelling unit must be contained within the gross floor area of the existing principal dwelling, except for the addition of a second means of egress.
Debbie, is that the May 21 revision?
Yeah, May
Okay.
21, 20, yeah, that's the one. The dwelling shall continue to be treated as a single family dwelling in RO and R1 districts. The minimum occupancy or rental term shall be 1 year and the unit shall not be sublet by the tenant. So they, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have any of those limits. Because
yes, we do.
10 unit.
Ours was, there's just 2 we don't have, and they weren't
Yeah.
bad. I mean, it's something we could look at.
No, I'm not saying these are good or bad. I'm just saying that like we chose to do the 10 limit and we didn't do any additional ones, you know? We didn't.
No,
Well,
also
we don't
didn't have
allow,
any-
we don't allow you to sublet. I mean, you don't allow you
That's true.
to
A parking too,
short-term rentals, you know,
We
that's
don't
all
have-
in there.
But we don't have a parking regulation for, as of right.
Yeah, but
You
So
you just-
Rich,
can't have
the way that I
parking
read this is,
regulation.
if you have a house and you want to make a you know, an ADU in it, it says no additional off-street parking spaces are required. So you have to have enough parking already, in other words, in order to do
Right.
it.
Right.
But we don't have that. We allow you to make a parking. But anyway, I'm just saying that these other towns, these examples of the other towns actually make
Well,
another point,
that's-
which is,
That's not entirely true, because you can't just make another parking spot. Right? Like if you were to, if so what happens is if you're gonna make a driveway, you gotta go for a permit for that, right? Like you can't just do it. So there's other laws that will kick in.
right, but
It-
this says if you need to make parking, then this is, you have to check all these boxes and.
No, I get it. I'm just
But
saying.
we don't have that, and I'm not saying we should. I'm not saying
No,
we
I'm
should,
saying,
but this is how these other towns keep them down under 10. is they
No, I
have,
know, but
they have these
folks
other
listening,
guardrails that we don't have.
but what was just said though makes it almost scary, like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get more parking lots. No, that's not actually what that means. We're not
Okay,
saying.
I didn't mean to scare you that way. That
Okay.
wasn't my intention at
All right.
all. I had a whole entirely different point.
Rich, you know
Entirely
perfectly
different
well
point.
that people park on the street and they will, instead of putting in a new parking,
Yeah.
enlarging their driveway, it's more likely that if they don't have enough parking, they're gonna park on the street and it's not enforced and people do it.
Yeah, that's a different issue. We got, I
And we
can, I
know,
can
so-
point out the ones too. We have a lot of places that people are parking in
Absolutely.
their backyards and all over
So
the
it would be
place.
nice to have a restriction saying that your ADU, that you cannot park on the street.
But why would you have that restriction for an ADU when we don't we don't enforce it against the
You know,
people
we
that
have
already
it as a
have,
law
that already
in
live there?
town.
We should.
I think we should have something that says adequate parking. We should just say require, you need to provide adequate parking, whatever.
No, those
I
are,
would-
no, those are interesting statements. I mean, like, they are. I mean, what tells me is they're putting ADUs in place. There is some as of right. Everyone's got some different restrictions. Some are way more than what we have. Some are way less than what we have. Anyway, we got way down a rabbit hole. I think it was different than what this ADU is doing. Was there a change that we wanted to make here?
Well, I think I would agree with Kathleen, maybe take those towns off.
Well,
Because
maybe I would rather just say that none of these are intended to be examples of what we're proposing. But if somebody wants to do a little bit of research what other towns have, why not let them look it up? We're giving them some information here, they can look it up. You know, like, because if they were just gonna start from scratch, they might not know which towns to look at even, you know, because you know, you have to
But we're-
spend a little bit of time, like, so we could say here that, you know, before these particular towns, like these, we don't represent that these are, their bylaws exactly what we're proposing here. But if you want to learn more about ADUs in other communities, you can look to these. So I'm fine
Yeah,
with
that's
taking
fine.
three
That's fine.
out or adding that language, but it's like, if somebody wants to kind of really
But if
understand what other
we're
communities are
saying,
doing.
but
We're saying we're most likely gonna get 2.5 units because that's what the greater Boston area sees. But we're,
No, that's all it's saying is we're not saying we only get 2.5 units.
the
All we're saying
average
is,
number of ADUs approved annually in greater Boston municipalities is 2.5. And then
that's a
you,
fact.
that's a fact. And what I'm saying is that then you refer to 3 towns that do it very differently than we do. And maybe they are getting 2.5 units, but that's because they have all these limits that we don't have. I'm not saying
I
it's
don't
right.
think
I'm not
they go,
saying
I
it's
don't think
wrong.
you read them I don't think you're supposed to, you're not reading them you don't read them together. We're just reporting on here that the report says that it's 2.5 units per, you could look up in Lexington and see how many they actually have. We're not saying Lexington only has 2.5. I can probably go to the report and look up and find how much they do have. But
I
I
have
don't,
here, I have it right here. It says
There you go.
11 permits since 2016 and as of 2018. So I did not call them, but this was published data.
How many do Lexington have?
It's there on that bullet point at the very end, since 2016. So between the years of 2016 and 2018, when that report was issued.
Yeah, that was the point.
They did
is that You're
11.
saying 11 points, right? 11, that's in the bullet. The whole point of these bullets is to say, see, all these towns have so few units, right? And then what I'm saying is Lexington doesn't allow in the vast majority of their town. Lexington only allows ADUs in 2 small zones. And if you look at their map, they're like tiny. It's the local office area and the business area. That's why they only have 11.
Why don't we
Isn't
go?
this a moot point because we have a cap? I mean,
Yeah, I
That's
know.
the- that's the way that our bylaw is
It
gonna limit the
number of
is, except that
ADUs.
everybody's been talking about taking the cap off.
well, we're
So you
not
could-
talking about taking the cap off.
So you could also maybe go in and all right, I'll just throw this out there. I'm not saying we have to, but so if those 3 cause real heartburn, I see what you were doing, Cheryl or Kathleen, whoever put those in. You're giving some examples. I get it. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about all the rules and regulations in that town. So yes, there's definitely, you're right, Denny. There's things behind each of these. But the bullet above that, so the fourth from the bottom, about 2/3 of cities and towns in the Boston metro area, 68 out of 101, allow ADUs and more are working on zoning. So if that's an actual fact, that's a big number. And quite honestly, if you don't want to point to towns, you could just list out the 68 communities and say, go check these out. You know, if you've got time between now and town meeting, you could, I mean, their zoning is probably online, most of these, and you can read them. I've looked at a bunch. There's lots of different rules people put in, some better, some worse, some strict, some not. Some I think are really awful to put in, and some are maybe there's a couple we could add. Who knows? There's nothing that says when we put our laws in place, add or change in the future.
I do
Never
want to
done
point
that.
out, I do want to point out in the bullet above, so you have 3 bullet points at the bottom. Those are the towns. The bullet above, it says about 2/3 of cities and towns in Boston metro area, 68 out of 101 allow ADUs, and more are working on zoning to allow them. Milton's already included in that 68 list, and I think we need to make that point.
You
We're
could say
already
including Milton.
including Milton. We should say that.
But then, I don't know, I mean, you could always put a link in there. Is there, where did we find that? Who put that in? How do we know 68 out of
Is that the
100?
Pioneer Institute? thing?
Pioneer
The-
Institute study.
And
So maybe you-
MAPC.
Maybe your
MAPC.
source. So maybe put the
It's
source
there.
there so folks can go look at that 68 and do their own research. That's if you don't want to point people to certain towns. I see what
I
you're
mean-
doing, but that causes heartburn, take it out.
All right, look, let's take the last 3 bullet points out and let's get this out, okay? It's.
Put the tag in there though, where
Yeah,
people can
There's
go
just
find
no
these.
guarantee, there's just, you can't guarantee that all information can't be challenged. I mean, we know this from life. I mean.
You can challenge every single
can't-
thing
You
out there,
can't
yeah.
guarantee that what your intentions are going to be met. So you do the best that you can and you provide the information that you think is helpful. And I'd rather get this out than not get it out.
All right,
So let's
I
take the bullet
just
points
wanted to
out.
try, I just wanted to try to do my best to make this the best possible document that it could be. Just like I wanted to make the article the best possible document that it could be, because I actually, that was my goal. And I just hope you take it as it was intended, because that was my goal. And I frankly feel a little
I'm-
up.
I'm
because
fine. It's
No,
just
I
getting
just do,
late.
because I honestly was trying to make this the best that it could be, and I feel like it was treated otherwise, and. But
I'm
it's
sorry if
fair-
I offended on that, but
No,
I don't think it's as important that, when we spend so much time talking about those 3, that they're adding that much. So that's why I said, let's take them out, because it's
Okay.
like, if it's causing that much,
no, I
um,
appreciate that, and
I'm just trying to have information that's useful, that's all.
okay. thank
We
you.
just want to, I think, compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges, and this seems like yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
It may have been misleading to say that this is likely because it's not allowed in the majority of the town of Lexington. So it's very different than,
Yeah, the reality is that people want to guarantee that something has been done somewhere else that's exactly the same, and it's just not the case, because the situations in other communities are different.
Yeah.
And, so we have to use the best data available to us, and not all of it's going to be 100% applicable, but, so that's all.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and Cheryl, I wasn't offended by anything you were saying, that wasn't it. All right, okay, so if we look at, we're also adopted by all Cape Cod towns in 2021. I think Meredith made a really important point that I mean, I think it's interesting information. However, Cape Cod is seasonal, it's short-term rental, it's second homes. I just don't think that that's really the comparison for Milton. And
It's
we're
far less
still-
dense. It's far less
Yeah.
dense.
It's so,
It's just
far-
a statement, it's just a statement of ADUs in the region. The caption says AD zoning in the region. It doesn't say ADU zoning in Milton. It just sort of says if people are interested in ADUs, they can know that in fact, all the towns on the Cape passed it last year. And these are other sources of information. It's not saying, oh, yeah, therefore, it's Milton. All this is saying ADU zoning in the region. That's the heading.
Yeah, I think it's kind of important. I understand what you're saying about the seasonal, but on the other hand, it's the kind of workforce. You have a workforce that can't afford to buy a house there because the housing prices have gone up. We have that same situation in Milton. We have people who work at Milton Hospital. We have people who work elsewhere in town, including our town hall and our planning department, who can't afford to buy in Milton. So it's trying to address the same kind of thing that I think we're trying to address here too. And this won't be this, they recognize too that they're going to need to work on other solutions. It's one piece of it. And the housing production plan is really clear that there's no way that we're going to meet all of our housing needs with one full swoop of one thing. Even the 40Bs aren't going to do it. I mean, they're only reaching a certain kind of audience and certain locations, but they're not going to meet the intent of what the ADU is, what we're trying to do with the ADUs, right? So anyway, my point about it, I would like to keep the Cape Cod one in, because if you read why they did it and you read some of the information, I think there are applicable things. Okay, so I'm fine with taking out the Lexington, Newton, and Arlington, but I would like to keep the Cape Cod one in.
Okay. All right, can we add Milton is already included in the 68 out of 101? Because I think that would be of interest.
Sure.
And how many of those are on Cape Cod? I'm curious.
Yeah, there's a lot of towns on Cape Cod.
I think there's 11.
Well, because I think what happens is Barnstable or whatever covers a big section.
All right. Okay.
All right, so are we done?
Are we done?
I told you earlier I hadn't had dinner yet. Now you see what happens. I get to 10:30 and I haven't had dinner.
Oh my God, is it 10:30? Oh my God. All right.
All right. Were there other things? Anyone?
I don't know. Meredith, did you have anything else?
That was it. I think that was everything that I had.
All right, then I'll revise this tomorrow. Then I'll send it. Denny, can you then send it to the town clerk? Or would you want one of us to, or Tim to? But what I did before was I sent it to the town clerk and asked her to send it to town meeting members. And then sent it to the chair of the select board and the warrant committee and asked them to distribute it to their members.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. What did we? Okay, so
can I ask one question? Sorry.
Yes.
Can I have one question about the endorsements and support? I believe those endorsements were prior to our making all the changes that were out of scope. Those when those committees voted to support it, we had not made all the changes, which made it out of scope, which then we had to have a public hearing. So essentially the endorsements, they were endorsing an article that completely changed or changed significantly. So I'm wondering if we should.
Well, we can ask.
They were endorsing a different article, essentially.
Well, then we can ask them if they, but I'm not willing to take it out because I don't, the Equity and Justice just did it.
Yes, I guess the Housing Committee, the affordable, yeah. So maybe.
And I don't know whether they've taken it up since, but Melinda Collins provided testimony, and we can reach out to her, and if they want to.
She provided testimony to the warrant committee.
And if they want to counter this at town meeting, then they can say, we did it on an earlier version, we don't do it on this one. I'd rather let them speak up against it at that time.
All right, that's fine. I just wanted to make a note that it was
Yeah, it was at the beginning.
Prior to
I mean,
Okay. All right. Let's see.
But I think it is, you know, tomorrow's Friday and town meeting's a week from Monday, right? So I really do think it's important. Yeah, I mean.
Well, we'll be
so
at
this
town
really
hall
needs-
tomorrow. We'll be at town hall tomorrow morning and take care of it then.
Mhm.
I just think it's really important that it get out with the request tomorrow so that we can try at least have people have it a week before town meeting.
Good. Yeah.
okay.
And as far as the discussion, Denny, if I may, about presentation at
Mhm.
town meeting, I'd like to suggest that Kathleen take the lead on that since she drafted the article.
Sure.
Okay. Kathleen, would you like to do that?
I've already said I got my Joan of Arc gear all set up.
Okay. So I think I'm gonna be at the town hall during the town meeting. I don't know if anybody else wants to come with me, but
I'll go to town hall.
I thought we had talked to Tim early on in the beginning to say, to serve,
Oh,
save
definitely,
space for
yeah.
us.
we'll book the room, so everybody's coming in. That's great.
Yeah.
But we'll all have to end up having our devices, right? Our laptops with us, like we
Yeah.
did.
Oh, right. I hope we get a nice room like we did last time. That was nice.
Yeah.
The last town meeting was that it was 1 o'clock in the morning and I was sleeping, well, supposed to be sleeping on a boat on the Rhine. 3 hours.
Jenny,
Oh,
what room did you have last time?
I feel like we were on the Council on Aging or something, so I don't know.
Yeah, we
where-
were, if you
was it
walked
the high
in, you
school?
went to the right and then was immediately on the left there, kind of.
Yeah, where are we gonna be out of? Are we gonna be out of the high school or the Council on Aging? Do you know?
I don't, I mean, so if it's gonna be remote for everybody, let me talk to the select board and kind of see what they're thinking. I want to make sure that they get, you know, whatever room they feel they need, and the warrant committee, if they're gonna be doing the same, we'll want to make sure we coordinate. So it may be, you know, whatever the procedure was the last time, maybe we'll do that again, but I'll coordinate with them about that. We'll get, Denny, all of our rooms are nice, thanks to our
Oh.
wonderful consolidated facilities department.
That's good then. Then I can look forward to this. Okay, so do we want to talk about anything else related to the town meeting?
Tim, maybe you should stop your screen share.
Oh, he's got his to-do list. He's so organized.
I don't have a problem with you seeing the notes that I actually took tonight.
Okay,
Is that the last agenda item?
it is.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, second, all in favor?
Yes.
Hi.
Okay,
I,
all right, Rich Beeler,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Gaius,
Yes.
Miss Denny. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Have a good night.